accusations.
We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim. It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us fight and be slaves. And everybody's just walking around, head in the clouds, and won't awaken to a dead in the grave. By then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days.
Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government releasing poison in the air.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is Top Lobsta, the father of disinformation. Before we get into today's guest, I would just like to remind all of our live viewers that this is a 30-minute preview only. Sometime around the 30-minute mark, we'll be going live exclusively to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad, where you can continue enjoying an ad-free experience, enjoying the flow of the conversation, as well as engaging in the live chat. And you can do that all for free. That's right, guys. Sign up for a 7-day free trial, absorb as much content as you possibly can, and then get out before the billing cycle.
There was actually, I think we should stop saying that.
Are they doing that? Are they doing what I'm saying?
Well, they are. So somebody sent us a message, and I don't even know what to do to this guy. I guess we'll just send him his money back. But he said,
he said, hey, I absorbed all your content.
He's like, dog.
Got out of there.
He said, I really don't. What did he say? He said, here's what he said. You took $5 from my account membership, but I didn't want to be a member. I really needed that money for food. So if you could please refund me, that would be awesome. Swear to God.
Oh my God. Let's send him double. Let's send him $10.
He must need something. What are you going to get from $5 with food? Listen, let's introduce the guest. This is wild.
Okay. All right. Anyway, patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. All that good stuff. Joining us today is Ricky Verandas. Ricky, for the audience who may not be familiar with you, let them know where they can find your work, which is a lot of places actually, and what it is you focus on, which is a lot of things actually.
Yeah. So thanks for having me, guys. This is going to be a blast. I'm really excited about our conversation. But yeah, you can get all my content at the Ripple Effect Podcast.com or RickyVerandas.com. I've been doing the Ripple Effect Podcast since 2013. Was kind of a musician and just content consumer, just a huge fan of like documentaries, anything that went against the grain, actually anything artistic that went against the grain. If it was music, art, documentaries, podcasts eventually, and really just end up doing the whole 9-to-5 thing. After I stopped doing music, I was kind of bored with life, kind of felt like a little unfulfilled, kind of felt like I needed some type of purpose. I wasn't contributing anything to the universe. So after a while, I'm like, hey, well, the band broke up. I'm doing, I was doing music, but I was doing a solo project called Theory 6, which is why people will see that, that term pop up from time to time with my work. But Theory 6 was my music project. I was doing it completely solo, but it was time consuming. It was a lot of work. It was time consuming, and by the time you actually wrote a song, and then you recorded all the instruments, and then you just did all the work, released it. It was just so time consuming, and then I really got into podcasts, and I was doing a lot of driving and commuting for work. And I got obsessed with podcasts. I'm like, oh, great. This is like food for thought. This like 2-hour drive can be a complete waste of my time, or I can actually make it fly by. And when I get to my destination, I'm like, I don't even want to get out of the car because I'm so deep into this conversation. I'm enjoying it. So and then I'm like, hey, I have a bit of a studio. Why not use that music equipment and software and repurpose it for podcasting? And then kind of started in 2013. Rogan obviously was a huge inspiration. I loved the long form discussions. I also liked the open source idea of James Corbett. He was one of my first guests, and so I kind of continued doing that. So then, and I very similar to Joe Rogan, I had a lot of different interests. So I would have people, MMA people like, Eddie Bravo was an early guest. I had Pat Miletich, Justin Wren. And then I would also have musicians, Burton C. Bell from Fear Factory, by the way, great theme song. Vinny Paz, another great artist. And you know, so I had musicians on, Fire from the Gods, Enter Shikari from the UK, tons of great musicians. Then I would have historians. I was always in the diet and nutrition and health, because I thought that was some of the best conspiracies. I think the cholesterol conspiracy, everything about how we should eat and live has been, and then really just went down those rabbit holes, and then eventually during just a lot of years of like networking, making friends, we started a show called the Union of Unwanted, which I co-host with Sam Tripoli, Midnight Mike, and Charlie Robinson, and basically, you know, that came together because what we were doing during the era when things were kind of shutting down and whatnot. A lot of us were dealing with censorship. I eventually got kicked off YouTube and also just censored on every algorithm related to YouTube and Google. But we were talking about, hey, you know, we're dealing with this. This information needs to go out. How do we go about putting it out there? So we gathered a bunch of content creators, and I just used like my networking ability and all the friends I've made throughout the years, and we just did a huge show. We had Luke from We Are Change on there, Ben Swan, you know, obviously Sam and my other co-hosts and all these people, and then Mike came up with this term. He's like, yeah, we're kind of like a union of the unwanted, and we're like, hey, well, you should hold on to that. And he bought the URL right like during the podcast. We kept that, and then we really enjoyed it, and then eventually we're like, hey, let's make it its own show. So then in 2020, I believe, or 2021, somewhere around there, we started the Union of Unwanted, which is a show we do every other week, and it's just a roundtable discussion show. We bring in different content creators, thinkers, researchers, and just kind of brainstorm and try to do our best to bring different opinions and perspectives and have civil discussions about what's going on in the world, sharing research, right? Because it's like we're all content creators, but a lot of us are also, or we should be content consumers. So it's like I might be listening to a really good researcher, somebody else might be digging deep into a different story and a different researcher's work, and then when we gather, we can kind of share that stuff. So it's been fun. Those have been kind of my main two projects. Music has kind of taken a back seat a little bit, and the name of the podcast, Ripple Effect Podcast, was actually named after one of my songs, which is the theme song, ended up being the theme song of the show. But in regards to the guests, John Stockton's been on, but then I've always really been, we talked about it a little bit before we went live, but I've always really been into diet and nutrition. So I've had Dr. Dominic D'Agostino on a bunch. I actually had him on before he was on Rogan's. Rob Wolf, the guy who created Element and also did the Sacred Cow book and documentary, Dr. Sean Baker. But even early, I had like Dr. Brzinski on, which was one of the most censored doctors at the time. He was like this just leading researcher in treatment, was a Polish immigrant who came to America, got his PhD in his like early 20s, was like sought out by like John Hopkins and all the biggest hospitals, and then eventually created or found something called anti-neoplastones, which was having success with curing. And it's an interesting story because I got real lucky to get him on really early in like my podcasting career, if you can call it that. And he had a documentary by Eric Mercola called Brzinski. And in that documentary, and obviously I watched the documentary before I had him on, they were talking about all these like bots and how big had these companies and firms that would like basically pollute any positive information on Dr. Brzinski's treatment. So, you're watching a documentary, and anybody who's saying anything good about Dr. Brzinski or has anything positive to say, in the comments, you'll see like, no, it's pseudoscience. He's a murderer. He's a killer. He's a this and that. So it was interesting. So, and then when I got him on and I officially booked him for the show, I got excited because he was like kind of one of my first really big and important guests, and I was really excited to share with my audience. But I just started like probably a couple months before I had him on. Didn't have much of a platform, but just myself sharing that he's coming on, I've dealt with the same type of campaign of like bots and people contacting me with fake accounts saying that he was a murderer and he's a killer. And then
What year was this?
And this was probably late 2013, early 2014. And yeah, and his documentary is phenomenal. I mean, it will pull at your heartstrings. I mean, it opens up, and I'll just tell the story really quickly, but it just really right from the get-go, it really pulls at your heartstrings. It opens up with this police officer who had twin daughters, and one of his daughters had, and they basically said, hey, like you can do the modern treatments and to hopefully extend her life. So they're like, okay, anything that will extend her life, why not? So they go through the treatment, and apparently like the was making her urine so toxic that they had to wear gloves to change her diaper, and she was in like pain constantly and all this stuff. And this police officer is testifying for Brzinski, Dr. Brzinski, in court, and he tells his story, and then he goes, he hears about he's like, well, I have to get her off this treatment because I'd rather her live less time with less pain than more time with pain, right? So he gets her off this treatment, finds out about Dr. Brzinski, does his treatment, goes through, I believe, another hospital to basically keep up with her tumor and see if it's shrinking. I think it's like 8 weeks or something along those lines. She's completely free, completely, basically it seemed like a miracle. A year later, she passes away. They do an autopsy. They find out it was her, and he tells the story in court, and he's like, if I knew, then she would still be alive. If I knew that this treatment even existed. And Dr. Brzinski, he's had like heads of CIA go to him. He's had members of the Saudi family go to him, but the FDA sued him and would not let him get FDA approved, or I think he got approved and they took it away from him, and they kept bringing him to court. There's even like a famous a scene of a judge going to the FDA attorney and saying, hey, you guys keep losing this battle. Why do you keep bringing him to court? And the purpose was to hopefully, from their perspective, hopefully he would run out of funds. They kept bringing him to court.
Drain him of funds, yeah,
because they knew that he wasn't doing anything illegal. His treatment was actually safer than statistically, and so, and I mean, it causes you try to fight for something that causes. That's why most people who become free using typical treatments will eventually have other types of later in life, and that's because of the. So, I mean, I've had Dr. Thomas Seafruit on my show. He's out of Boston University, and he had 150 peer-reviewed studies showing that the ketogenic diet can cure, prevent, and treat. Because, and just using like logical understanding of that glucose is energy source for, obviously, if you starve your body of glucose, you're starving of a energy source. So he has 150 peer-reviewed studies. He wrote a book called "There's a Metabolic Disease," and there should be something that everybody should be looking into and know about. Nobody cares. He's like, he's like, nobody's interested. He's like, nobody's calling me. He's like, nobody's like, and I have research showing it. He even showed that even if you did the traditional treatments, like if you did the ketogenic diet and you did, dietary things like that, or even fasting, that it can help with your with the treatment. It will help progress the treatment better, and you'll have better outcomes, and you'll become free quicker. So it's like, the point is like, it's just the big for a long time were, they're the real domestic, and they're the ones who, growing up, 9/11 was a big red pill for me. Obviously, Jason Burmis was one of my first guests. I thought, I was trying to get him to understand how important his documentary was. He's a very modest guy, but it's like, dude, your documentary changed people's lives. It was at least the starting point for many people to go down many different rabbit holes. And so those type of geopolitical stuff was always an interest of mine. But when I really started understanding and noticing that, like, hey, like that stuff, the stuff that's going on overseas is important, but I'm like, we have people that are not living their best lives, or getting sick and being stuck in this cycle of, you talked about somebody who couldn't afford food. I mean, there's people who can't afford the medicine that, that the food industry made them need. And, and so it's like, it's one of those, and really, and I can rant forever. That's why I started a podcast. But it is one of those things too that's another question that people should be asking. It's like, why do we need so much medicine? Like, what's wrong with our system? People will spark the conversation of like, oh, how do universal base or universal healthcare and all these things. And I think that's important, and I think an important topic to discuss. But we should, instead of asking like, how do we get cheaper healthcare or more affordable healthcare, maybe we should be asking, why do we need so much healthcare? And years ago, people used to, the doctors used to ask you like, hey, are you on any medication? Today, they ask you how many medications you're on.
Yeah.
And everybody's on something. There's been 0 studies on the combination of these medications together. Like, so when they do a study, it's a solo study on those medications. Nobody. So when a doctor says, "Hey, take this," hey, I know you're on, high blood pressure pills, and you're also on this, and you're on that, and he gives you another pill. Nobody knows how they're going to interact and how they're going to affect your body. So it could lead to other symptoms, which lead to other medications, and it's this.
Have you seen that video, Ricky, that's been going around lately? It's a guy that goes into a bunch of different psychiatrists, and he lays out the exact same symptoms to each different doctor, and they all diagnose him differently. But not only do they diagnose him differently, they prescribe him a litany of pharmaceuticals, and each one is different from the previous doctor. So, in other words, he goes there with the same symptoms. They say he has something different. They give him a different cocktail, and it's like it's a huge kind of pulling back of the curtain to see how the industry works, because we've been giving these people the benefit of the doubt because we've been programmed to in very many ways, right? Trust the experts, things like that. And then when you see how the sausage is made, you go, there's almost zero rhyme or reason to how it's all predicated, especially our mental health industry, right? It's predicated off of bunk science that doesn't exist. This idea that there are in the brain that they've never been able to produce or prove. There's no baseline for that, right? Like, I forgot who told us top on the show, but a great way that they laid it out was like, you know what the pH balance of your pool.
Brzinski.
Was it Brzinski that said that?
Yep.
Well, either way, it's like you have a pH balance that is baseline for your pool, and you know from that baseline that you're operating to try to level these different acidities or whatever the case is until to the point where they're at the baseline. But we don't know what a baseline is for human brain chemical function, because in order to observe it, you would need to somehow, I don't know, lobotomize a living person and measure their brain chemicals. So all of it is already off to a shaky start. In fact, everything that you've been talking about, at the beginning of the show, it screams. You said, why do we have all this giant medical apparatus, this giant medical industry here in America? It's not for our benefit. It's a lucrative industry. And so when people go, well, it's a big industry, they don't want it to be eliminated. They want it to be managed so that they have a patient for life. And that's very nihilistic. And you get called a conspiracy theorist for even thinking that way. But even the story that you just told us is like, makes it real hard to give them the benefit of the doubt after that.
Well, the DSM was completely based on bullshit. The DSM, which is the Bible for mental health, it's completely based on bullshit. They use that term because it sounds scientific and it sounds like, but they don't ever test you for any. So, in other words, like they're telling you have which logically means like they should test you to see how in balance it is, which chemicals are in balance. They don't do any of that. What you do is you get a pill, and if that doesn't work, you get another pill. If that doesn't work, you get another pill. And there's a great documentary, which it's funny because I've been promoting it forever. I shouldn't say promoting it, but I've been telling people about it because it really does a great job of going into the history of the DSM and how they, before prior to psychologists being able to write prescriptions, like you would go see one and they would talk to you about your issues, try to like resolve it by talking, right? And then it got to a point where like big pharma's like, well, it's much like easier to just write a prescription and we can make tons of money because we don't have to do any tests, we don't have to go do any experts. You can just walk in and say that you're kind of down, and nobody's going to second guess writing that prescription because this person's depressed. Nobody goes into like, okay, did you lose your job? Did you lose a family member? Like,
did your dog die? Any number of things. And also the turnover rate it makes it a lot faster. You don't have to invest in a particular client and talk them through their issues, which, it takes it's a long process to unpack childhood trauma and all these things. Just give them a pill, get them out the door, get the next one in, give them a pill, get them out the door. That's much of what the industry has become, is just a revolving door of patients. They want you in, diagnosed, prescribed, and out as quickly as possible.
Well, it's symptom management, and there's a documentary called "Making a Killing," and
Mm.
it's funny because I've had some doctors from that show or from that documentary on my show. And I don't even think they even knew, but apparently it was funded by some group that's like linked to Scientology, and it's like, and I'm like, oh, that actually kind of makes sense though, because they are kind of right about their outlook on these mental health issues,
Yeah.
because you look at, like, you go back and rewatch the Tom Cruise famous scene of him talking about, antidepressants. He's right. Like, he's right about just about all of it. And what they don't tell you is that, like, exercise has been proven statistically to be better for mental health than any. And
Mhm.
what happens is that these drugs suppress all emotions. So it's not just anxiety or depression or whatever, like, they suppress everything, so you become a zombie. And you
Yeah.
see it. I mean, I've talked to police officers about how these when they lock somebody up and they're on these pills, like, he's like, they're like emotionless, right? And they're like these zombies. And that's why for a while with these mass they were talking about, like, hey, why don't they release the records and show us, like, what drugs they're on, because their lack of empathy when they're doing these crimes, like, that could be a part of it. And
Mhm.
there's so I had a song back in the day where I got these little samples of the court case with Prozac, and these people in the 90s, I don't know if you remember, but, like, Prozac, and you can still find them online, like Prozac.
Prozac and Zoloft.
Yeah, one of the side effects of this antidepressant is, so so you're literally taking something to prevent, you figure the most extreme symptoms of depression would be so you're trying to prevent going down that road where you're, and instead one of the side effects are, and there's like these crazy testimonies of people in court talking about how, like, this one mother who said that she was holding a gun to the bed with her husband and her kids in it, and she didn't know why, and she was like about to pull the trigger and she dropped it the last second, and the second she got off the Prozac, she was fine. And there's all these but it's actually one of the side effects of most of these antidepressants are like thoughts and all this other stuff, because
Yeah, these SRIs, if you stop taking them cold turkey, you experience all those latent sort of suppressed emotions, right? Because you have no emotional range, like you said, you're like a zombie. And when you cold turkey them, because you finally get fed up with being in this state, that's a lot of people's not routine, but you see it commonly, right? It's like the doctor prescribes it, it's supposed to help. Instead, it turns you to a zombie. You hang in there for a long time. Eventually, you go, these things can't take them anymore. Stop taking them cold turkey. And a rebound effect of like heightened emotional state is what follows after that. And that's what they suspect a lot of these are experiencing. But you said something before. You were talking about dogs, and I just thought how funny it is
You
that
know, I sorry, I just want to, because this is like a, I guess you can call it a Christian show, even though we say some crazy. Uh, but in Revelation 18:23, it just reminded me of this. It says that in a certain place, the light of the lamp will never shine again, and the voices of the bride and the bridegroom will never be heard again, because the merchants there were great and deceived, and they were great and deceived all nations through sorcery.
hmm,
But the Greek translation of that word
oh,
sorcery is pharmakia,
right.
and that's like constantly referred back to as like like sorcery,
Yeah,
basically
the
spell
beginnings of
casting.
the pharmaceutical industry, right, is
Yeah, yeah.
pharmakia, yeah.
So when we're seeing like this with people that are just completely zoned out, zonked out, like they have this like warm blanket over their head, over
Mhm.
their brain that doesn't allow them to express emotion or really think outside of the box at all. I start to go a
It
little bit
reminds me
deeper
of
down.
like the Haitian voodoo zombie kind of a move, right? Because they're
Yeah.
going through some sort of a pharmakia ritual, but then they're coming out zonked out of their mind and highly suggestible, right? Highly open to suggestion. Um, but that thing with the dog that's significant is that owners of dogs know, and it's pretty widely accepted that, especially if you get a working breed, let's say, um, they will display neurological, you know, issues, I guess, And a lot of it is because they're pent up and they're not working. So this dog has an energy expenditure demand. It needs to be worked out. It needs to have a job. It needs to run in a field. It needs to get exercise. If the dog doesn't get exercise, then the dog becomes neurotic and it displays all kinds of undesirable psychological behaviors. Anxiety, for sure, you can observe anxiety in a dog. So when you're saying, Ricky, that exercise has been proven to be significantly more helpful, at treating things like depression than pharmaceuticals are, we don't, for some reason, we can't accept that about us, but we can look at a dog and go, yeah, the thing needs to be walked. It's got to be walked. It's got to be exercised. It's just such a simple thing, but whatever they've done to us, we're willing to overlook that about ourselves.
Yeah, I remember telling somebody about what for it's a natural herb. It helps with hangovers. It helps with just feeling better. And somebody's like, "Yeah, my doctor or my dog's taking it," and I'm like, "It's funny." I'm like, "You should be taking it. You drink more than your dog, I would assume." But it is funny how like certain things. We don't connect those dots. And I think a lot of it is propaganda. It's just like the medical world has done such a great job of like talking about the experts and that, even mental health. You guys, I'm sure you're aware of like the rat park experiment.
Yes, yeah. And even that has been sort of unfairly portrayed, I think. But can you tell the audience a little bit about it?
Yeah, so it was just a brief I guess background on So they were giving these mice water. They had them in a cage. They had water with like some drug. I don't know if it was
I think it
cocaine,
was
heroin,
cocaine,
whatever.
yeah.
Might have been cocaine. And they had water with cocaine and water that didn't have cocaine. The mice naturally kept going to the water with cocaine, eventually died,
Yeah,
right?
dog.
So people are like, hey, like it means that cocaine's really addictive. And then these, I believe they're Canadians, like doctors or scientists, or they kind of were thinking about the study, and they're like, well, the cage has become a part of the experiment. So let's
Mhm.
see if we can recreate the experiment by giving the mice its natural habitat and see if it's the cocaine that's bringing them back to it. So they got some warehouses, created their natural habitat where they could roam and play and exercise and be with other mice and whatnot. And then they did the same thing. They had water with cocaine, water that didn't have cocaine, and they came, drank the water once, went away, never came back. And they're like, oh, okay, now we figure this out. Like why they're going to the cocaine. What wasn't because it was addictive. It was because they were in this cage and they were unhappy.
Yeah.
And then if you give them other places to find happiness, then there's no need for it. And I think addiction is much of that, right? Like I think a
Mhm.
lot of people, it's not a lot of times we think it's external, it's about the substance that we take, but it's not. Like it's internal. It's about some emptiness, some unhappiness, or whatever. I remember telling a buddy of mine, he went to UMass, which is kind of known as a party school locally. I live in Massachusetts, and he's like, oh, we'd go to these parties, and he's like, there'd be some cocaine there, whatever. He's like, I remember I tried it once. He's like, never touched it again, and that was it. He's like, but my buddy I was with tried it, and then next thing you know, he became this crazy partier who just was like doing it all the time, um, and he's like, it kind of makes sense because I knew what I was going to college for. I had like a path. I had a girlfriend. I had a stable home, and he was the complete opposite. No girlfriend, was
Mhm.
going to college, but didn't know if that's what he wanted to do. Didn't have a great relationship with his parents, and so it's like, growing up, adults would always talk about like, oh, this drug is more addictive than that drug, or that drug is more addictive. And I'm like, well, if you can just quantify simplify that easily, then how come if I do that addictive thing, I don't have the same response as somebody else? If you
Mhm.
can quantify it as like, hey, it's this addictive, then how come one person can have a drink of alcohol and drink as a social drinker, somebody else drinks a sip of alcohol, next thing you know, they're like,
They're spiraling.
ruining their lives. They're
Yeah.
they're
Well, that's the thing is like I'm not going to do fentanyl, but if you locked me in a cage for 10 years and then after a decade you came to me and you said, "How about some fentanyl?" and there's nothing else in the cage, I'm probably going to do some fentanyl. You know what I mean? So it's like it's an absence of positive stimuli.
It
But
also comes to the idea that what we discover on the show is like what certain drugs peel back as far as like the material realm.
mm,
And alcohol, spirits, they peel back a certain veil that we think would expose you to different some type of entities. Like, if you do DMT, you're going to see some clockwork elves. If you do ayahuasca, you're going to see a cheetah-headed lady. This is like fairly common. So when you're doing methamphetamine or crack cocaine, things like this, there are entities that are associated with these things throughout mythologies, throughout history. So the El Kukui, he's associated with, that's like the boogeyman. He has like sharp teeth and like, or maybe even like associated with the chupacabra in like Puerto Rico as well. Same kind of description. He's associated with the cocoa leaf. So it's like, it's interesting that when these people are doing these drugs, they are opening a doorway and now they are in touch with XYZ entity. And from there, you could start to describe their influence and like the path that they go down. It's like, are you talking to something there? Is something now
Yeah,
able
like
to reach out to
Marzinski
you?
said that, right? Marzinski said that methamphetamine was the closest thing he had ever seen. Dr. Jerry Marzinski is a clinical psychologist that worked with schizophrenic patients. He said the closest he'd ever seen to the manifestation of schizophrenic symptoms in an individual was through meth, and that he eventually came to the place where he thought schizophrenia was you're being beset upon by something that's external to your own self. So throughout the research on the show, we've come to a place where we think these things manifest in like a frequency, and your brain can kind of tune into them. And but he says that methamphetamine is almost like kicking that door open so that you can have this communication with these things, and the door closes very slowly, much slower
Yeah.
than any other drug that he'd seen in a prison setting dealing
It's
with
almost
schizophrenic
like
patients.
he described it as like people that are doing this to excess, like the door doesn't even close anymore. It's just wide
Right,
open.
right. It's just
So
wide open.
you're being tortured like 24/7. You know what I mean?
But that notion, uh, Rick, of like trusting the experts, it kind of brings us like right back to the beginning of the conversation. We were actually having it before the show started. And when you were describing this, I found myself smiling. You were talking about, a 2-hour drive and listening to podcasts. And I almost kind of miss those days. I don't really do that anymore because I don't drive anywhere. I do this full time. And but there's like something real I don't know.
Yeah, dude. This
It
is
made
how I
everything
it's how
so
I
much
met
better.
Ricky. I met you, Ricky. We just met right now, but I met you years ago.
Mm.
Surprise to you, huh? Driving
Driving
a
truck,
tractor
right?
trailer. Yeah, in New York City. Just listening, learning, talking to
Mhm.
myself. Nobody else heard me, but here we are a couple years later. It's interesting how that
Well,
works.
it's fascinating because as a podcaster, it's funny when that comes out of my mouth because podcasting has like almost a dirty connotation to it. Like I think it's the connotation is we are the opposite of the experts that they tell you to trust. But funny enough, most of the information that I've gotten over the years, new subjects I've become fascinated with, they're inspired by different podcasts that we're listening to. But when you fast forward to 2020, and I know you're just talking about going through, you're kind of like battling with the medical industry back in 2013. But 2020, we all found ourselves battling with the medical industry. And it's wild because they told us to trust the experts. It's clear the experts misled us egregiously, and that's probably being generous.
And now purposefully is like I think that's the
Well, that's what I'm saying.
question.
That's why it's being generous. We're like,
I'd say that. I'd say purposefully, but like we were talking before the show, how do you talk to normies about this kind of thing? Because if I talk to my aunt and I was like, these have been lying egregiously on purpose to you, and they want you. I like the Michael Malice quote is like, they want to see your kids and they think it's funny,
Mhm,
and I think that that's like right there. Hard to tell somebody that is not ready to hear it, but it's like, yo, they want you
mhm.
and they want to see your kids and they think it's funny. And that's like the bottom line of really what we're talking about here. No ifs, ands, or buts. How do I get to that conversation with a normal person? That's up to you, you know?
Well, I would say that the way you do it is maybe you don't have a conversation. Maybe they shut up and they listen, right? Like so much of what
Mhm.
I came to learn was just listening to conversation on podcasts. Um, what I'm just saying is during a time where they told us to trust the experts, it was the podcasters, and not to like aggrandize podcasters too much, but like thank God for them because so much of the information that helped how many people? I mean, it's not even we're not even being hyperbolic if we're saying those people who told you, pump the brakes. Maybe don't listen to what the media is saying. Let's analyze this. Let's hear what everybody else has to say. And let's not jump to conclusions during the lockdowns. That version literally saved lives. Literally saved people's lives. Changed some people's minds. I'm not going to go get an invasive medical intervention. I'm not going to go do that. I'm going to wait and see as more information comes out, because some of my favorite people that I listen to on my 2-hour ride to work, you know, you kind of trust them after a while. Some of them are going, I don't know if this is what they're saying it is. And I don't know if we should jump straight in. Hey, maybe you should talk to your own doctor personally. Talk to your doctor. Maybe get a second opinion from another doctor. Literally save lives. And so I just think it's sad on some level, but the very people who have been ridiculed, you know, Joe Rogan's a great example. CNN tore him down, painted him gray, you know, dragged him all over your television set. And all he was doing was having conversations. Robert Malone, Peter McCullough, he has him on. Is this really as bad as we think it is? And for some reason, the mainstream media is screaming about that. Trust the experts. Don't trust the podcasters. But I think the podcasters' track record's a little bit better.
All the way to today, and I think let's bring it to that this culmination. But we're at the 30-minute mark,
That's
so
right.
we have to shed the pores, unfortunately, Ricky. But
shedding
we'll
the
put a pin in
pores.
that. Yeah.
Guys, it is 38 minutes in, and we are now going live exclusively to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. Don't worry. You can go over there. You can continue watching this episode, hanging out in the live chat, and you can do it all for free, plus all the other perks that exist over on patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. Otherwise, we'll see you guys later. All right.
Right. So,
yeah, what do you think about all of that, Ricky?
all that, yeah,
everything we just said.
Well, I think Rogan is kind of a perfect example of somebody, you know, like how everybody takes that journey slightly different. I mean, I've been a fan of Rogan's for, like I said before I started my podcast, he was a big inspiration because of just like my love for long form discussion. I'd be at the pub with my friends having a drink. You have those nights where you're, you know, debating things all night. You're having, you know, rounds and you're arguing about this, you're debating about that, you're whatever, sharing personal stories. And podcasts for me, like I'm like, all you're doing is like archiving those type of discussions. You're trying to recreate them and you're sharing them with the world. And but with Rogan, like I was, especially when it came down to like the discussion, I was a little disappointed in him for a long time. And you know, I had people like Del Bigtree on my show. I mean, he said it on my show, this was before that, his exact words were that you know, Rogan was a and he wouldn't have him on, and he's like, because I remember telling him at the end of one of the episodes he was on of the Ripple Effect podcast, I'm like, hey dude, we got to get you on Rogan, because I'm like, I know he's open-minded and he's not afraid of talking to, you know, what seemed to be like people who go against the grain and controversial at times, but it seemed to be the one topic he wouldn't really go deep into. Eddie Bravo would push on the topic every once in a while, but he just seemed to have his mindset that you know, are safe and effective and have done a lot of good in the world. But you would see tidbits of like him questioning it. And we talked about disease slightly before we started recording, and I had Chris Newby on. This was way before, and she was a scientist who wrote, I think the book's called Bitten, and she wrote a book, and she was a scientist, really respected writer and author and researcher who came to Massachusetts to, I believe, Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard for a vacation, got really sick, went back to California where she lived, and was misdiagnosed about 1,000 times because they don't see disease in California. So they never connected the dots and thought it was disease that she got in Massachusetts. So she was like bedridden for like a year or two or something like that, her and her husband. And then she's like, what is going on with this disease? Like, I want to learn a bit about it. And so she ends up doing some research and finding out that she thought it was you know, it was basically government. They weaponized it and they created it. It wasn't naturally made. And she, you know, and then I had her on during again to kind of talk about it and share her perspective on, because it seemed very similar to the disease story. And you know, obviously the story is that it started in Plum Island, which is off the coast of Connecticut, and they do have this like this uh, place where they do research there. The government does research there, and it's really secretive what they do there and whatnot. And there has been some pictures. I don't know how factual it is or if they're real or not, but for years you would see weird animals like on the coast of Connecticut, like these weird like mutated animals that didn't seem like something we've seen before. So there's always been that mystery there. But I remember one of the times Chris Newby was going to be on the show. I was doing some research, kind of refreshing kind of my memory on like the history of and some of that stuff. And then I ran into a clip of Joe Rogan talking about disease with, I forget which MMA fighter, if it was Edgar, I forget which one it was
Frankie
on.
Edgar.
I think
His
it was
wife.
yeah, yes, exactly. And somebody they're sharing the story, and then Rogan talks about somebody close to him who got the disease and basically got like really sick and got disease from it. And they're sharing the story, and Frankie Edgar's like, so they're sharing the story, and they're basically talking about how skeptical they are of that disease, and how it was a bad idea. And then during that research, I also ran into a clip of Rogan talking to Peter Hotz about the disease. And this was after the Frankie Edgar episode. So now I kind of have a little bit of knowledge that, like, okay, Rogan has a personal story and a personal connection to somebody who got disease from the, and eventually that got taken off the market and whatnot. So he's talking to Peter Hotz. And Peter Hotz apparently is friends with the guy who patented or came up with it or whatever. And they're talking about it. And Peter Hotz says it was taken off the market because of all the anti-vaxxers speaking poorly of it. And so Rogan's like, no, I don't think that's right. Because he's like, I have a friend who got it, who got really sick from the, and I believe that's why it got taken off the market. And so they're having this little debate. And the reason I bring this up is because it was the first time on the show that I'm like, that's like, I think he's connecting the dots in real time. Like he just caught Dr. Hotz, who he obviously had on because he believed some of the stuff he says, and he thought he was a credible person. And I'm like, he's connecting the dots that he's lying about this one. And then like, as time went by, every once in a while, I would like see reflections of like Rogan questioning the mainstream narrative on. And then eventually he had like Rhonda Patrick on, who was a friend of his. He actually had a debate with her on the show. Like they had like a friendly little debate, and they're pushing back and this and that. And he's like, and he's just saying things that logically make sense. Like if you already have you tested positive a bunch of times, already been sick, what's the point of getting and taking that risk? And that's the thing. Like I always tell people, I'm like, if something seems like it doesn't make sense, it probably doesn't make sense. I think sometimes we are told and convinced and tricked into believing that it doesn't make sense to us because we're too dumb to understand, and that experts haven't figured it out. Like, don't worry about it. Like, it doesn't make sense to you because you're an idiot, but the experts say it makes sense. That's because it makes sense, And most of the time that's not the case. Most of the time something doesn't make sense, it's because it actually doesn't make sense. And so little by little he evolved. And I think that seeing him in real time, going from like never questioning to Del Bigtree calling him a wuss, saying that he knows personally that Robert Kennedy Jr. has their people have talked to the Rogan people and he won't have them on, and Del Bigtree seemed upset about that, and rightfully so, to eventually having Robert Kennedy on and letting him do a 3-hour history lesson on the lack of science of and all that type of stuff. I'm like, you saw it in real time. And so I think a lot of people, even in our own personal lives, like sometimes it takes that much time. It takes like, one conversation, one documentary, one article, one person. And, I've had pushback in my own personal life with many people throughout the years. I mean, I have 2 kids. I'm not ashamed to say that neither of them they've never been vaccinated. They're both great athletes. They do great in school. No, no autoimmune issues, no allergies, nothing. And I say this publicly because not because I'm bragging, but because there's a lot of parents who are looking to make those decisions who, like, all they hear is that if you don't vaccinate your kid, all these bad things are going to happen.
Yeah.
And no, like if you're reassured that like, hey, we were told the same scary things, and we've have examples of kids who are 10 and 8 and are, you know, have no cognitive issues, have like they're great athletes, they're never sick, they're not allergic to anything, we never go to doctors for any reason, then maybe it will reassure you that like, hey, I can make this decision and it's not a bad decision and whatnot. Because I think the people who for a long time, I mean, if you're for lack of a better term, like you were like the worst of the worst. I think like,
Yeah.
you know, like saying that the moon landing was faked, or you know, or saying that 9/11 was an inside job was like less of a emotional response than saying that, you know, was linked to or
It was like was the tip of the spear, and it was only second place, and it was a far second place was like denier. And if you had those two things, you were absolutely the worst
Now you
person
have like
alive.
flat earther, moon landing denier.
But
That
those are
kind of
just
stuff
silly.
full
Those are
down.
not
are
so
fun.
egregious, right? You're like, oh, you're an idiot. You
let
believe in
me-
flat Earth or whatever. But
wait,
Let me
you
just say
guys, you
something.
guys think we land on the moon?
No,
no.
no,
Oh,
dog.
okay.
There's just no way.
There's
I
no-
find it funny. I wish they would have sent that to the moon, Katy Perry's keeper there, but they barely got out of like outer Earth orbit or
They're
inner Earth
doing
orbit.
a ritual, I think. They're doing some divine feminine bullshit. You know what I mean? Because remember the guy that retrieved the egg from the UAP, whatever, and he's like, yeah, when I was flying the helicopter, I got a sense that I was sensing God, but it wasn't masculine. It was feminine only. And then all of a sudden, what's her name? Katy Perry goes into low Earth orbit, whatever you would call it. And she's like, I really felt connected to the divine feminine, the goddess energy. I'm like, shut the up, man. So I think they were doing some kind of goofy little ceremony or ritual. But Ricky, what you're talking about there, right? Even the length of time that it takes for an individual to come to the conclusion that they've been lied to is directly correlated to how deeply they've been propagandized. And
Here's
that
a problem though. I'm gonna call bullshit. Not on you, Ricky, but I'm calling bullshit on Rogan mostly because he knows these things. He was saying them early in his podcasting career. He's friends with Eddie Bravo. And then he goes on and like you said, like he's having this conversation with Peter Hotez, and he's like, that's strange because my friend actually got from that. And I'm like, you're playing stupid. You are not stupid, but you're playing stupid. So there's like this I love Rogan, love what he does, but it's without a doubt that there's a controlled release to what he's doing, which
and
is why
he
you
might be
can't
doing
have
it smart. He might have to do it that way. When you have the biggest platform in the world, you can't just come out and say X, Y, and Z. Maybe you can let the audience come to their own conclusions and let the guest say the crazy things.
Do you think a little bit is the weight on his shoulders of like, hey, as much as I want to pretend I don't know that this is the biggest show on earth and everything I say will influence everything and the whole world as we know it, like I think that weight is on his shoulders and he recognizes it and it's unavoidable. And I think at times he might know something, but unless he's like completely bought in, he won't take that leap quite yet. And I think, you know, with the thing, it's like a perfect example because he would push back on Eddie and others who were anti-vax. And then eventually he's like, hey, here's Robert Kennedy Jr., and I'm letting you completely debunk all the science uninterrupted for 3 hours, and I'm putting it out there, and I know it's going to be one of the biggest downloaded shows ever, and I know it's going to change a lot of people's minds. So it's like for him to take that leap, you know, I do think, and I think you guys have hung out with Sam and, you know, probably even Eddie at some point. You know, I did too throughout the years. And I remember always like saying, hey, like, what's Rogan doing? You know, and Eddie would always, and Sam too, would always reassure me that like, hey, he's coming along. And you would see it like, so the Alex Jones episode where they talked about Pizzagate, right?
That was great.
And, yeah. And you could tell that Joe wanted to pretend he was skeptical, but for the purpose of like, hey, I'm gonna pretend I'm a listener of the show who thinks everything you say is bullshit, and then we're gonna review it and we're gonna talk about it, and then this way, you know, I don't get looked at like, hey, I just let this guy spew whatever he wanted, and I didn't correct him or call him out on anything. And he did the same thing with Bart Sabrell, you know. And Bart's been on my show, the moon landing guy who did the movie A Strange Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. He was famous for having the astronaut punch him in the face for he had a Bible with him, and you wanted Buzz to put his hand on the Bible and talk about the moon, or admit that he did go to the moon or didn't go to the moon. And so he did the same thing where Bart felt like Joe was pushing back a little bit, and Rogan was trying to reassure him that hey, I'm pushing back because this helps the audience and this will help you in the long run, because now I'm asking the questions that they're asking and I'm pushing back a little bit, which gives you the opportunity to kind of rebuttal what a lot of these listeners are probably screaming into their phone or computer while they listen to podcasts. So I think there is a strategy and there is a method to his madness. I also think he's human, right? And everybody kind of reaches places at a different time and different rate, and I think when you guys are podcasters, I'm a podcaster, I like to believe when you listen to somebody that many hours, it's
who they are.
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, of course there's always going to be things that maybe somebody does a really good job of hiding or manipulating maybe a little bit, but for the most part who they are is going to come out. And you can only bullshit for so long, especially when he was doing 3-hour podcasts 5 times a week for years. If you listen enough, you're going to get all shades of his personality, right? You're going to get all aspects of him, and little tidbits of who he is will come out, right? And
that's why this is my problem, though, because it's I know who Rogan is, and I also understand what you're saying, where you have to play both sides a little bit of the way, and also to have have conviction on something that that you might not be right on. I understand that he understands he's moving culture, but on the other hand, you're having guys like Michael Osterholm on, who, in my opinion, that kicked off this whole insanity. Like when he had him on, that's the world shut down a week after. This guy came on and preached hellfire and brimstone. And it's unfortunate, but when you're at that level, when you're like Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, or these Ben Shapiro guys, it was I am looking at every single thing you're saying, and you've accepted this platform. It's a Faustian bargain. So it's you better be right, and you better be right now, because it matters right now. So we allowed the talk to happen, and he pushed back on it until finally there came a point where he was basically saying this is nonsense. But there's so many people in the interim that got hurt, and it's you knew this. And so the latest thing is the experts. I've been calling the experts faking for years now. Haven't believed a word they've said since probably, I don't know, 2018 at least, maybe even earlier. The whole Donald Trump thing really started to wake stuff up with a lot of people and really expose these bad actors. And just last week, that's it. Now we have the Rogan narrative where he's basically single-handedly taken down the experts, or they've done it themselves. And all he had to do was sit there and go, that's interesting. Why did you say that? Why did you? And now, the experts are dead. So it's well, why now? Why have we waited this long when these people like James Lindsay, that other British dude, Douglas Murray, they've been for quite a while out there preaching their good message on your show to millions of people, to the point where they've subverted the right wing. And it's but just now we're allowed to call them what they always have been. I've been calling James Lindsay all kinds of slurs for years. Clint couldn't understand. My friend Clint Russell, he's had him on the show multiple times. I'm this guy is you don't understand. And he's I don't get it. And I'm look at him. Look at what he's saying. He's clear. I can, you're clearly a leftist. You're coming to me as a leftist saying you're parading as a right wing, and whether you're right or left doesn't matter. But if you're going to lie to me, bold face like that, I'm at least make it good. At least disguise it's slightly better. This guy's, and whatever. But now we're finally dealing with it, and it's the damage has been done. So
I've been a fan of Rogan since about late 2009, 2010 or something like that, real early. And I got into him because he was talking about conspiracies all those years ago. And I was a fan all the way up until 2020. I'm still a fan of him. It's just how long could you listen to a dude? And what ended up happening was I had my suspicions about the lockdowns, and Rogan eventually platformed Robert Malone and Peter McCullough, I believe it was. And so much of what they were saying confirmed what I was looking at. So I was like, okay, I don't need to. This is happening too slow for me on the Joe Rogan podcast, which is not his responsibility. You know what I mean? We're at a really pivotal moment in
He's like, his
American history.
responsibility is to walk by the hand these people that, and I get it. It's so frustrating. Like the people that don't get it, right? He's walking them by the hand, and you have to show them slowly, step by step. Look, here's what's going on. Here's both sides. You still don't get it? Let's walk you through it. Then 3 years later, we'll say, oh well, this is what really happened. But this is 3 years later.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if you're a conspiracy theorist, it's kind of like, and I don't think people are guilty of looking at Rogan as an authority figure, really. But you're better off just doing your own research, which goes in the face of, trust the experts or whatever. But my moment that I thought was really strange is very anecdotal. There's nothing I could prove about it, and makes a funny clip. We've made a clip of it before where Joey Diaz is high out of his mind and something happens. And Joe Rogan, he said maybe he was like picking up Joey's call. And he's like, yeah, dog, I don't know. We thought the CIA came and visited you again. And Rogan goes, what? And then Joey Diaz goes, never mind. Anyway, and just changes subjects. And I'm like, what's that? And what all I want to say about that is like, you don't know what happened to Rogan. I think I have a good sense of who he is just based off of the countless hours that I've listened to him. But you have the biggest platform in the world. It's awfully attractive to people who have a lot of power. And who's to say that somebody doesn't come and, let's just say, manipulate you one way or the other, kind of coaxes you, or maybe they bribe you, or maybe they threaten you. You know what I mean? I just think sometimes we're not looking at Rogan's platform for what it actually is. It actually is the biggest platform on the planet. So do you think that there's not constant attempts to co-opt that platform in some way, shape, or form? We're talking the same intelligence agencies that created the Doors and Jim Morris and everything that Laurel Canyon did. They manufacture our culture currently and have for generations. But they would leave Rogan's podcast alone, the most significant cultural manufacturing machine, of modern day. And then maybe what's next after that? What's more? I mean, man, this is an honest question. What's more influential, Twitter or Joe Rogan? I don't know. I can't answer that. Yeah, I almost want to say that Joe Rogan is probably still more influential than Twitter.
What moves what? That's a great question. And they both move on major levels.
So I just think, like, man, who knows the pressures that he's under? And I think that Joe Rogan did really well for a really long time. And he's still great. You want to listen to something about MMA? There you go. You want to listen to something about health and nutrition? There you go. You want to listen to something about hunting? There you go. There's all kinds of fascinating still happening there. But as far as the cutting edge of information that's pertinent to the moment that we're in, because if you go one way or the other way, you get inoculated, you get vaccinated, you get myocarditis, or something like that.
You're going to need the Ripple report.
Yeah. There's other places for that. But I just think there's no fucking way. There's no way in hell they didn't get interested in the Joe Rogan experience as a platform. There's no way.
I have no doubt that, I mean, there's no rock that doesn't, get looked under, right? I mean, if you're the CIA, there's operations for absolutely everything. I mean, I remember when I had Jesse Ventura on, and he talked about when he became a governor and how, he was called into the White House. He went into like this, they wanted to talk to him, and they brought him into some meeting room, and nobody had ID. Nobody would tell him who they were. And he's like, what the is going on here? And he's like, dude, I'm a governor. Like, you guys need to tell me who you are. And he's like, most of them probably gave him fake names. So he talks to, I don't know if he was somebody who was in Secret Service or buddies in the CIA, but he's like, hey, what do you think this was all about? And then he's like, they want to know how you got elected. And he, because he was the first independent, Minnesota governor to be elected in Minnesota. So like, it was all about like consuming data and gathering data to eventually use for their own propaganda and whatever. So like, without a doubt, like, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes with Rogan that we're not aware of in regards to like, them trying to influence him and them trying to, some way sway him in one direction or another. There's even stuff that he's probably not even aware of, right? And maybe he's had people on that he thought were sincere and decent people, and then next thing you know, he's like, I think they were a plant, so I think,
dude, it's all of those things, right? It's like it's so many of, and I'm very hard on Rogan, but I do think he is one of the people that has navigated that the best, to the best of his, I mean, to the best of anyone's ability that thus far, he still has maintained this, like, I guess somewhat view of the truth. He just has to he's got to jump through ropes to get there, man.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he can't really just say anything because they'll try to kill. Right now they're trying to kill him for the experts thing. Like James Lindsay is saying that, oh, this was a test. The Douglas Murray was actually sent to help Rogan, and Rogan failed. And now basically we have to take him down. This is what James Lindsay is saying. It's like, who the is we? Who is they? What does this have to do with Israel? What are you guys talking about right now? Who's taking who?
It's super scary. I mean,
Oh,
you think about, how how many conspiracies, like huge conspiracies, like some of the biggest conspiracies,
The biggest ones.
the biggest ones of our time, JFK, 9/11, Epstein, right? Those are three. I mean, maybe you can we'll find out that they're some way related.
I'm sure, yeah,
but like at least those three, the one thing people won't talk about is the Mossad link. And it's like, and maybe sometimes they'll bring it up as like a footnote, but nobody talks about it as like a primary suspect in those.
Ricky, it happened so long ago, so it doesn't even matter.
I even think the same with the P. Diddy thing, just given that he was running that blackmail operation out of the Virgin Islands, and it's like, so Epstein is operating out of the Virgin Islands, so is P. Diddy. What are they just waving at each other from island to island? They're not having any crossover. They're not banging the same
runs
kids.
the music industry. I mean,
yeah, there you go.
There's a lot of people, and some people believe Candace Owens has kind of hit on this topic too a bit.
So you say Candace Owens runs the music industry? I was like, I bet, dude. I bet she does.
Yeah, when is she going to be on a Tom McDonald song? But
it'd be better. It'd probably be better.
Would be better than Ben Shapiro. Roseanne, though, she did all right.
Yeah. Roseanne is my favorite. Everybody thinks she's some subversive, evil Jew, and I'm like, maybe, but she's a lot of fun. And I
just think she's crazy.
Yeah,
I love a literal crazy person. I met her at a Skankfest, sort of, and she was like sitting in the corner. I was like, "Hi," and she was like, "Eh." I was like, "Okay, never mind." My bad, Roseanne.
Sorry,
she was on the Union of Unwanted. We had her on, and she was hilarious because she called in. Her internet wasn't working, so she called in using like a landline, which we had to like delete the video and upload it because it had her number on.
That's so funny.
Yeah, we're like freaking out. We're like, oh, she's gonna get calls like right after the show. But she's on, and so she's on a landline, so she can't see who's visually on the call. Well, one of the people that we invited, or actually Sam invited, I wasn't even certain who he was, but he's a guy in the comedic world. I think he does movies or whatever. But apparently somebody brings up this guy, right? And apparently he said something about her special once. She didn't know he was on the call. So she's like, "Dad, left liberal retard," like going crazy, right? He's like, him, this like goes on this huge rant, right? And then we're like, Roseanne, he's on the call. And then he's like, Roseanne, all I said was, like, I just felt like that special that that you're referring to, like, it wasn't up to par. It wasn't like to your level. And just because you do amazing work, and I just feel, and then she's like, yeah, you're probably right.
I love her. I fucking love her so much.
And I laughed my ass off because I grew up watching that show.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It's like, I can't, like, even when she's talking about serious stuff, like, I'm like, I can't, like, I can't help but like smile because I'm like, she's so funny in the way she says things. But one thing that we talked about with her too, and this kind of goes into some of the topics we're hitting on, is something that she said, which is really important. And this goes into the deeper level of conspiracies, the level that, like, Rogan won't go into at most of the time. And, we talked about, like, people talk about how, like, it's all financial, and it's like very kind of like materialistic surface level of view of things. Like, oh, where everything's just influenced by money. And it's like, kind of, but then there's another level to it, right? And she talked about how, like, her and Tucker were the highest rated. They're huge personalities, high rated people on TV, and they both got dropped, right? And like they didn't get dropped for financial reasons because they were killing the ratings. But like they got dropped because of maybe spiritual, maybe evil entities, maybe it was because the agenda was bigger than just financial. And that's the thing that people don't understand. Like there is another when you look at like a Bill Gates, like he's not doing things because of finances, right? He's already loaded. It's about molding the world. It's about influencing and engineering the civilization in the image that you want and having control over it.
She
And
believes all that spiritual stuff because she was talking with Tucker Carlson and they started talking about the Nephilim and Top and I almost had a stroke because it was in the early inception of the show and it was just like right place, right time, right name because it became sort of a bigger talking point in the conspiracy zeitgeist after that conversation. But yeah, they both believe in spiritual entities, a spiritual realm, and that this is moved in a way that, to your point, Ricky, it's not just a nuts and bolts and cash. There's something else going on.
oh, without a doubt. And when you look at the history of eugenics and you look at, it's all like spiritual to some extent. And I think, you talked about alcohol. I'm Portuguese. I was born in Portugal. My parents were winemakers. Alcohol has always been a big part of, our culture. And I have a glass of wine every night with dinner. And I some of my best ideas and thoughts come from when I'm drinking. And because I think we're creatures of habit and we get very easily stuck in a pattern, not just of living, but thinking. And sometimes you need something to kind of like throw a stick in, the spoke of the bike and like just get you to fall and be like, yo, where the am I? Like I've been just kind of riding this bike in the same road, not even thinking about looking at my surroundings or looking at things from a different perspective. And that's why I think like traveling, sometimes substances, like a drink or smoking or whatever you want to do.
Well, we talk about that often. It's like the Greeks, they attributed a lot of their great works of art or otherwise to the muses. And even that gentleman that we mentioned earlier, Dr. Jerry Marzinski, he tells us that he believes upwards of 80% of our thoughts are not actually our own thoughts. They're just things that we're observing that are passing through. And then it begets the question, what's the source of those
Yeah,
thoughts?
he's like he thinks like we're antennas. So
Mhm.
as you're saying, because I agree with you, I'm not like when I say these things about like, well, alcohol is, it's gonna summon spirits, is like not, I mean, yes, but in moderation. Even in the Bible is like drink, but don't get drunk. There's a
Mm.
certain like level that you can do to like thin this veil because there is some like there's something that you can glean from the other side of this veil, and you can thin it a little bit with certain substances,
Yeah.
mushrooms, alcohol.
Wasn't Stephen King a raging alcoholic? He says that all his
He's a cokehead.
Oh, he's a cokehead, okay. That his works all came to him in dreams. So it goes to show you there's different ways to be you could be inspired. You could be inspired to write about demons and
Well,
drinking children.
then that goes to the MK Ultra idea, right? And a lot of the study that we've been going through with Dr. Andrija Puharich and what he was doing, summoning the Council of Nine,
Mhm.
and his work that will then translate into telepathy and MK Ultra that will be developed a couple of years after. So it's like it's all very similar. It's all the same thing. Everybody has this idea of how to do it, but we can't really put our finger on exactly what it is. But I think the government might have
I just
they
wanna
might have
go
dialed
back
it
to
in.
something though before we dive into if we're going in that direction, MK Ultra, CIA, things of that nature. But we were just talking about Jesse Ventura, and in very many ways, Jesse Ventura is why I was skeptical of the era because back in 2009, I think it was on his show Conspiracy Theorist, he had a lady on. I forget what her name was, but she had fled the country. She was a whistleblower. She came back to talk to Jesse Ventura. And the long and short of it, or the short of it, is that she believed they were using gain of function research to manufacture a that was going to be detrimental. But what was even worse than it was going to be our reaction to the and specifically the vaccination that followed. She said this back in 2009. And I never forgot that. And I just want to put this we're talking about Rogan, how a narrative changes. Suddenly he doesn't believe that the moon landing was faked. This is, remember, 2009, Jesse Ventura's Conspiracy Theory. This is a show that never leaves me. It makes me skeptical of everything. It makes me skeptical of swine flu, H1N1, Zika, Ebola, everything that happened, I was like, oh, this is it. They're gonna do the thing that
You know,
lady
it's
was talking
crazy.
about.
As I run this through Descript, I'm just thinking about. I'm like, there's not going to be any discernible words in this
No, 'cause
episode. It's going to be great.
So this is, I want to share this really quick. This is
Yeah.
boom, share screen.
Let
This
me
is
pull that
Jesse
up.
Ventura. Let's see what date this is. August 30th, 2021. And he says, people say they don't trust the government, so they won't take the really? The was made in the private sector. The government is paying for you to get the shot for free, so everyone is protected. I urge people to get the. And you know how crazy that is? To
It's
be hearing that from a guy whose show is the very reason I'm not going to go through with this lockdown bullshit. I
Well,
mean, like, what do you think happened there, Ricky?
Well, it's funny you say this because, I had a similar experience with Dennis McKenna, Terrence's brother. He's been on a bunch. Um, and I also had a similar, and then Ventura's kind of very similar. And then also this doctor called Dr. Robert Lusting, who had like this viral, a lecture about the sugar industry and how it's like really the leading cause of all our health issues and whatnot. He was in the documentary Sugar Coated. But similar stories where like I had Dennis McKenna on, right? We talked the first time he was on, we talked about plant medicines. We talked about his that he was a part of this movie called Neurons to Nirvana, great documentary, all about plant medicines, and I've been a huge fan of his. And he could see through the big bullshit, and he could see, he understood why it was being suppressed. But then you got him the second time he was on was I think it was around Trump's first election, and he goes on this giant anti-Trump, rant, and I'm just like, oh my god, like not even psychedelics can get you to see through the propaganda. Like he is talking about the left like they're the saviors and Trump's the boogeyman, and I'm like, so even somebody like him has certain blinders. And then Jesse Ventura was the same thing. It's like he hated Trump so much and they talked about how like when you're older in age and you're closer to the finish line than you are the starting point, like your perspective on on the was slightly different, because it's like the older you were, the more you wanted to believe that it would help because you're afraid of death, and maybe you when you get older, you're required to have a little bit more faith in modern medicine and the medical system because you're just required to use it more often. So I think that was a little bit of the issue. But I remember having Sean Stone on, because Sean was another one who's been on the show a bunch, and he at the time they used to do a show on RT called Watching the Hawks with Tyrell Ventura, this host Tabitha. They've all been on my show because that was a show I used to watch on a daily basis, and on RT, and Sean was on there too. And I'm like, hey, you're friends with all these guys. Like, they've all been on my show. Like Tabitha, Tyrell, and Jesse are all, even though you guys have all been a part of some amazing work in the conspiracy world, like what the is going on? And Sean, like, he just, he kind of said what I think expect him to say was, he just, for some reason, well, I think a little bit it was fair. I think a little bit was like his dislike of Trump, that it just happens to be one of those topics where he has blinders on there. And there's a lot of people like that. Dr. Robert Lusting, his book's around here somewhere, but does amazing work on dietary, helping your health the dietary way, and I think is it a case against sugar? I don't know, whatever. But he's done a lot of work on sugar, and just how the sugar lobbyists have done a great job of giving you this propaganda that fats and sodium and all these other things are bad for you, when really the culprit is sugar. So we have this huge podcast talking about all this work, all this amazing research, the benefits of keto, fasting, the benefits of eating whole foods, the benefits, of all these things, how sugar is bad, and how sugar industry has paid scientists and nutritionists to say that, don't eat this, don't eat that, when really it's sugar. And then at the very end of the show, I don't know how it got brought up, but somebody brought up and then next thing you know, like, he's going on this rant, and I'm just like, look, I'm like talking to him, and I'm like, how do you not see that the same money motives that are pushing this narrative are also pushing that narrative? And it's just like over and over again, I find these examples of people that are so open-minded with so many
What did he
different
say to it? What did he say when you presented them that? Was there like a block?
well, he just thinks that, that like for some reason is the one, and I always joke around about this. I'm like, do you think like so big who has the biggest fines in fine history and constantly gets caught lying about this. I mean,
Yeah, I
I
think
forget what
Pfizer paid the biggest
the biggest
criminal settlement
Billions.
in history.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
History.
And the thing is, also what they don't tell you is that the studies that they give to the FDA are created by the pharmaceutical companies who want to give you positive studies to get their stuff FDA approved.
Mhm.
And any negative studies don't have to be shown ever. So that's why there's a huge percentage of drugs that get put on the market. So the FDA consider it FDA approved to be safe for the human consumption and for the public, and then eventually get taken off the market. That's why you see these commercials for like, hey, have you taken this drug and had died? A loved one who died? Like, call our law office. It's like, wait, I don't get it. Like the whole point of having an FDA is so this doesn't happen. It's so we don't become guinea pigs and you're like, hey, try this. Hopefully it helps and it doesn't kill anybody. And instead, it does happen. So it's like obviously the system's flawed, and that's one of the flaws in the system is that the studies are created and manipulated by the pharmaceutical companies because they're not required to show you any studies that show you that their product's unsafe. I mean, it's insane. When I had Dr. Peter McCullough on or Dr. Robert Malone, I had them both on before Rogan did, and they got me banned off YouTube, and that's when I kind of disappeared off the face of the earth for a
Yeah,
little
that's
bit.
probably when Top was looking for you.
Yeah, well, it just Zach Voorhees will talk about it. The Google whistleblower he's been on too, and he, once you get banned off one platform, all the algorithms, like you're on this blacklist where all the
Mhm.
algorithms, work against you, and so like even think my own shows that I'll Google to look up, like it wouldn't come up. I would have to go page after page after page to find my own shows, which previously I could just be like, hey, I did a show with Rob Wolf, Ripple Effect Podcast, Rob Wolf. Oh, here's the show. I'll send it to a friend who was looking for it. Boom, and that's it. And then that wasn't happening. So it's like you get suppressed by everything. But Dr. Robert Malone, when he was on, he talked about how like even the world of patenting things and getting things peer reviewed, he's like it's all political. He's like
Mhm.
every university wants their name linked to this great research or this great finding. All these scientists and doctors want to be linked to this great finding because it's like it's their legacy. And he's like, and it all becomes political. And he's like, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on like that where people just think, oh, it's just good moral people who are just trying to do good work. It's like no. Like if you have a study that's flawed, but yet it can get peer reviewed or it can get published or it seems to be a great finding in the world of medicine or science, and I can get my name out there, like you're gonna do it, and you're gonna ignore the fact that
It's an
maybe
industry like any other industry, it can get co-opted. And that's what's really funny about it too, is like that's what's going on behind closed doors, politics and infighting and all this, kind of shady. And then they turn around to the public and they go, "You're too stupid to understand this, so just trust us." Which is wild because even during this notion popped up that they violated the Nuremberg Code of Ethics by rolling out this and trying to not they're trying to compel you to take it. They're pressuring you to take because it wasn't mandated. It was like, it's not mandatory. You're not going to go to prison, but you might not be able to work again. You might not be able to fly or go to a restaurant or do any of these things that convenience you. And I wanted to know if that was true, but I'm not an expert. But I go, you know what, dude? I'm still going to try. And I found where they did the research on the mRNA. It was in Princeton. Princeton has like a medical research wing. And I said, man, I sure don't understand what this study is saying but I remember from high school that most of the time there's going to be a conclusion paragraph at the very end of this whole thing that'll kind of wrap it up for you. So I go there and it says outright that, due to the fact that there are no long-term studies on this because it's new, this would not be recommended for rollout. There's still a lot of research that needs to be done, and they told you what you found, but just that sentence alone, which was like one of the first two sentences of the conclusion, told you that this is experimental. Thereby, it's violating the Nuremberg Code of Ethics. In fact, I believe it's the very first code of ethics is you cannot compel or force or otherwise a populace to take an experimental medication. And this was experimental just by that. That's all it took. I didn't need to be an expert. I didn't need to be a genius. So these people are telling us that we're all too. It's like keep swiping the groceries at the grocery store. Put them in the bag. Don't worry about that. That's the height of the IQ that you're going to be able to achieve is that thing. Or, go push these cards or turn this wrench or do whatever. Don't worry. Leave the science, leave the medicine to the experts. And it's like, all you got to do is just look at it. And this is kind of laid out, those papers from Princeton, one Google search away. I found the PDFs. And then, like I said, I just went to the very last one. It's not out of people's reach, but they've made us think that it is.
And then you had Event 201, which happened right before, where they literally, recreated the era scenario before the era. John Hopkins, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the World Economic Forum were all a part of it. I remember showing people that those videos during, and they're like, wait, this was filmed before. They're like, yeah, and then they couldn't believe that it was this exact scenario of what they were living. And I always use I simplify. I try to simplify things and reach like the normies, like the easiest way I can to kind of dumb it down. And I'm always like, okay, if I forced everybody to eat peanut butter, I'm like, peanut butter, I think most people would say is, well, at least until recently, would say that it's a pretty safe thing, right? It's not something that's going to harm most people, right? But if I forced it on everybody, somebody's going to get allergic reaction. Somebody's going to die from it. It's good. So something as safe and a food that they sell at grocery stores that people use for sandwiches forever. If I forced everybody to eat this one thing, I'm like, there's going to be some fatalities. But yet you think the is safer than peanut butter because you think you can force everybody to take it, and you're not going to have any issues. And it's like you can't give anybody, or you can't give everybody any one thing and expect everybody to have the same outcome. I mean, there's people who are allergic to the weirdest of things, and then the Hep shot, right? That was another thing I'd always try to tell people. I'm like, why? It's a sexually transmitted disease. You get it from like sharing needles. Why does a newborn need it? Like, why? So you're telling me that I have to wash my hands when I go to the hospital to touch a newborn because their immune system's so sensitive, but you're giving them a that they don't need without any logic behind it. Like, I'm like, there's a motive, and the motive's money. And if you can kind of crack their narrative of like, okay, well, if this is influenced by money, because that's the only explanation you could possibly have, because you could easily test the mother. You don't have to vaccinate the child. Why would they? Doesn't that make you think like maybe these other are also motivated by money? It's like it's that simple, and it's like people just. But again, it's like anytime people start like connecting the dots, like and then the experts will be like, no, they're wrong. It's been debunked, and then you get these things like, oh, the link to has been debunked, and I'm always like, how like when you have a parent, and there's thousands of them, maybe even millions of them, who say that their kids got vaccinated and cognitively they see them struggle afterwards. Like, are you saying that they're crazy? There's a great documentary called The Syndrome, and it's about it kind of highlights the experts. And what's this?
This is a new. This is from Robert F. Kennedy, and he also found the cure for anti-Semitism, which is the MMR. But apparently, they're saying the rates have now gone from 1 in 36. That was the study 2 years ago that RFK cites, and it's now 1 in 31.
In 2 years.
In 2 years, and 1 in 20 in boys, which is
well, it's like when you're asking, it's like, is money the motive, or is it eugenics? Is it something beyond that? Because,
well, I mean, Ricky, we've got a crazy ass theory that, like,
oh yeah, can I say it? I like there's an inflammatory sentence that I like to say because it gets people going, what? And it's that I think that the schedule is an arm of the MK Ultra program. And I think that's exactly what the fuck's going on here, because we've gotten the same results from the MK Ultra program as we have from the schedule, and that is you end up with individuals who are subjected to it developing latent psychic abilities and dissociative identity disorders. And what we're seeing right now with the telepathy tapes is what made me think that, because
Another
these
thing pushed by
children,
Rogan at a certain time, which is very interesting.
that's where I kind of
Well,
look at it. And I go,
he did have Rupert Sheldrake on years ago. I also had
did he
Rupert.
really?
Yeah, I had him on
I love
after
Rupert.
Rogan, but I mean, he did have him on, and he did highlight, the morphic resonance study and talking about these things. I mean, without a doubt, you guys are hitting on it, and I think it's so important to have shows like yours that will connect these dots, because the truth is, like, there's something going on that we don't understand. The reality as we know it is much more complex, and there's much more deeper levels than we understand. And when you look at like a lot of things, and that you try to figure it out by, like, okay, you look at Nikolai Tesla, he talks about how the universe, if you want to understand the universe, you have to understand vibration, energy, and frequency. You look at, like, the pyramids, possibly, now they're talking about it possibly being a power plant, and that makes way more sense than, any other theory that they have, like it being a tomb with no people in there, which is
Right.
weird. But, and you look at, like, all these, and then you look at, like, the fact that similar pyramids were, like, created on different continents around the same period, but yet there's no way of traveling, or so
Separated by
yeah,
oceans and
yeah, and
language.
it's this idea of of us all being connected consciously, like, it makes sense. And the morphic resonance study, I mean, it was considered pseudoscience, but it's like, okay, we're not telling you we know what's going on, we just know it's going on.
Mhm.
And so it's like, we might not, just because we don't understand the method or the how, doesn't mean that we haven't proven that something is going on. And for people who aren't familiar with it, they would teach these mice, or they put these mice in a maze. The mice would take a certain amount of time to learn the maze. Then mice who've never been exposed to those mice or that maze in a different location would learn the maze quicker.
It's
And
like a
then
collective consciousness or something.
and you look at, like, have you guys, like, dove into the, like, the water theories, and, like, Tom Cowan actually does a pretty good job of also explaining it, like the water DNA thing, and how
Is that regards to like frequency and its effect on water and,
well, that
sort of the
too, but also the fact that it might have some type of consciousness, or
Mhm.
some type, it's not just,
living waters?
yeah, well, so it's like, they've done it with, like, how it crystallizes when listening to, like, sad music or
Mhm.
heavy music or whatever, and that changes. And so it's like, so this idea that, like, I mean, we're made of mostly water, right?
Mhm.
Everything's made of water. Like, I think the importance of the sun and water are understated most of the time. I think it's like the fundamental ingredients to human life, and just or any life, really. And so this idea that, like, we could all be connected, it is just one huge consciousness, and that we're all kind of sharing it, or there's ways of communicating. I mean, look at, like, radio frequencies. Like, if I don't have an antenna, how would I know that these frequencies exist,
Yeah.
right? It would take a method of, like, tapping into it, but it's there. Like, or same thing with Wi-Fi or whatever, right? Like,
Mhm.
there's things that are there that we can't see with our limited senses. So it's like, there might be, we talked about psychedelics, some people believe that's a way of tapping into it, right? So it's like, there's things about the world and the universe that we don't quite understand. That's why um you can't look at, like, past writings or scriptures or whatever, and just laugh at, like, some of the things that they say, or their worldviews, because it's like, there's pieces of evidence of how things really work in those, old writings. And I think our ancestors, and I think one of you guys talked about maybe it being suppressed. Like, you look at the Knights Templar, you look at, like, the Vatican Church, you look at Freemasonry, like, ho like, is this information suppressed? You look at Nikolai Tesla, when he died in New York, they took all his papers.
Yeah. Trump's uncle.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Nazi bell, that whole
Mhm.
conspiracy. I mean, look at people who've been curing with the frequencies, right? So it's like, if I
Yes.
sing the same frequency as, like, a glass, a cup or any type of glass, if I could hit that same frequency as that glass, it cracks, but nothing else in the room will be harmed by it. Well, there's people who believe that if you can find the frequency of the cells, you hit that frequency, you'll kill the cells, and nothing else will be touched. And there's people who supposedly have done it. And so it's like, there's all these, because outside of computers, like our technology hasn't advanced that much. Like when you look at like our understanding of like the world around us, that's why I think Terrence Howard is so interesting, because I think, you know, when he talks about the flower of life, he talks about all these things. I'm like, you, the greatest discoveries are typically found by people who are looking at it from a different perspective, who
Yeah.
aren't, who are outside of those expertise. Because if I go to school for virology, right, like they're like, these are the founding fathers of this world, this is where you learn, this is how we see the world, this is how this is the way we believe things work. So, and then any new discoveries are based on those fundamental principles, where if you get somebody completely outside the box, they're like, well, I haven't been brainwashed to believe these are the experts, and my, you know, my whole field of work has to be based on this initial work. Well, we need somebody to go like, well, what if those initial findings are wrong? What if their
Right.
perspectives are wrong? What, you know, so I'm building my whole worldview. I always use the example of like, it's like saying, hey, I'll let you build any type of house you want, but you got to use my foundation. Like I'm gonna you know, build this foundation in this shape. That's it. You can build up, you can do whatever you want from on top, but you have to start my foundation. And I think like sometimes we should say, well, let's blow up the foundation. Let's start fresh. And like maybe this isn't the way we have to build a house. Maybe there's other ways of doing it. And those people usually come from outside those expertise. You know, you look
I
at like
think it's the
Graham.
same thing as you're familiar with the fool and the king archetypes, right? It's like the fool, or I'm sorry, the fool and the hero. So like the hero's journey starts with the main character as being the fool, which is to say lacking information to realize that the thing that he's going towards is lofty, right? And so, but this person who lacks the information, lacks the context, doesn't even realize what they're stepping into, ends up conquering the day and returning back a hero. And it's like, yeah, the hero doesn't go to strenuous warrior camp and then gets taught by the experts how to be a warrior and how to go into the cave and how to slay the dragon. That hasn't worked. No one slayed the dragon. That's why it's still there. The warriors can't do it. So this moron is who ends up being able to do it. And it's because he sees something from a different angle that probably would have gotten squeezed out of him if he went to, you know, the warrior camp or warrior school. It's very similar in that way.
Yeah, that's why somebody like a Tom Cowan who is looking at. I mean, I remember Tom Cowan back in the day. He was when I first started getting into his work, he popped up on a Ben Greenfield podcast, and I love the fact that Ben Greenfield, somebody who knew way more about health and nutrition and these science research that he's talking about way more than me, because I'm always like, okay, am I too dumb to know that he's bullshitting? So when he was on the Ben Greenfield show, I'm like, okay, well, Ben Greenfield will like kind of call him out if it doesn't make sense. And he would talk about how like simple things, like just the way we look at something like a fever, for example, right? How we have it all completely wrong. Like we look at it as it's a symptom that we need to deal with, when what we should be doing is saying, hey, this is actually our body fighting what it needs to fight, and
Right.
you suppressing the fever is actually hurting the process. And you know, the fever's actually it's like saying like, hey, I got food poisoning, and you know, like I need to get this thing out of my body, and that's what my body's trying to do. It's trying to say like, I have this thing that I need to find a way out.
Right.
And
So instead, you're taking medicine to stop yourself from throwing up. And it's like, no,
yeah,
your body's trying to purge this thing. You can't have it in you. It's got to
exactly.
go. And you're like, oh, better take this medicine and stop that throwing up from happening.
Yeah, and actually charcoal will actually help. Activated charcoal will help with food poisoning. It'll kill you know, the bacteria. But yeah, like so all these things are like just, you know, the way we look at it is all wrong. Like most people look at like when they have a fever as like, this is bad. I need to like get this fever down immediately. When really it's like, okay, if it's not at a really, you know, unsafe number, maybe just let your body do its work. Maybe it needs to sweat it out. Maybe it's trying to warm, you know, get hot enough to kill the viruses. And because you know, that's why viruses stick around during the winter and everybody gets sick. And then in the summer when the sun's out and you know, the temperature's higher, viruses can't live. So people don't get sick in the summer, right? So it's you know, it's same thing with like John Stockton talking about this chiropractor that was really influential on him. And like, you know, instead of always like dealing with like the symptom, he was like, no, maybe like you're getting inflammation because your body's trying to bring extra blood there, or like all these just ways of looking at the body as like, hey, your body's really smart. We've made
It's
it
not
this
just
far
doing
because
random.
yeah, exactly. It's not a perfect way, but yeah, it's not just doing random. It's not like, oh, you know, this symptom is only some random thing because my body's falling apart. It's like, no, it's maybe it's your body trying to survive. Maybe it's there's some use in what it's doing, and instead of like suppressing this symptom, maybe we should, you know, reanalyze it and think like, okay, how can I help it with its efforts, right? And you know, so it's all like and again, this goes back to like outside of computers, like our understanding of the world is still very, you know, just hasn't evolved that much. And yet anytime somebody goes against the grain, they get laughed at and they go, you know, Rupert Sheldrake, I remember when I had him on and you know, I went on his Wikipedia just to kind of, you know, see if I could learn any new information about him. And the first thing it said was that he was pseudoscience. And I'm
Yeah,
just like,
fraud, pseudoscience. I love Rupert Sheldrake. I think his research is fascinating, and he's a very respectable intellectual figure. He's doing like these studies that he's doing, especially that one with the pets and knowing when you're coming home. And those are remarkable studies, and they should be received by the scientific community with arms wide open. I mean, it's one of the most fascinating developments in the scientific community for the past 100 years. You know, ever since it's been, you know, materialism has been thrust upon us, and all of a sudden there's something here that doesn't fit that paradigm. You would think that they'd be interested in it. They're not interested in it. I don't know. It's
and the
um
tapes, I mean, that's basically expands on his research.
yes.
It's, you know, when you look at these nonverbal autistic kids who can, you know, guess things and guess what their parents are thinking and whatnot. I mean, what is that, right? The average person would say like that. There's no way you could prove it, and they didn't just prove it. Like the I mean, I forget what percentage of accuracy they have, but it's like something insane. It's like
In one of the instances, it was like 100%, something really crazy. Like I forget whose parent and which student or which child that was, but yeah, really high percentile.
so what does that tell us? That tells us that like our understanding of things is like like we there's a lot more to discover.
Mhm.
And again, and this goes into is it being suppressed? Like, do they want us to not I mean, Nikolai Tesla and his whole story about free energy, right? Like they suppress free energy can easily be done, right? I think zero gravity, all these researchers who have looked into all these, I mean, the water, you know, car, you know, that guy who end up having a mysterious death. I mean, they used to suppress electric cars. Now they're like pushing electric cars. It's like it's all about controlling the market, controlling the resources. It's not about truth. It's not about, you know, any of that stuff. And a lot of it is social control. It's you know,
So
like
then, what do you make of it when this thing is now being presented? It's like not just being presented, but represented to the public in a very meaningful way. The number one podcast in the world dethroning Joe Rogan for a couple of weeks. What does that mean to us? Like, when I look at it, I go, yeah, that's always been there, but why now?
Mhm.
And then I start to look at the angle that she's presenting it from. What's her name? Kai Dickens.
Kai Dickens, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, it seems like one of these like 99 truths and a lie sort of thing. And the lie is like it's hard to exactly pinpoint where the lie is or what the lie is, but I glean that the lie is we all need to aspire to be this way. Like we all need to ascend, and this is the same lie that is I saw on your website there that you have a bunch of a couple of like alien encounter or abduction or the alien narrative episodes up recently. And whenever we hear about this alien narrative or this ascended master that's visiting us, it's like they're constantly telling us the same message, like you have to ascend, we have to humanity has to evolve, a cataclysm, something gonna kill you. And it's like the same from these nonverbal autistic kids who are communicating with
Mhm.
who knows what on the other side.
Yeah.
And now it's presented to us in this weird new age fashion by some lesbian. And I'm supposed to just be like, yeah, cool. Totally cool. It's like, no, not cool. I don't trust a word you say. And you're saying it like truthfully, but you're cutting out a lot. There's a
Well, have you
lot.
seen that, Ricky? Have you seen that cataclysm in your whatever episodes you've done in the whole UAP UFO kind of a thing, where like there's a coming. For example, we just talked to somebody. She's an abductee victim, and when we asked her what the message was, she specifically, explicitly said polar shift. That's the message. Is that a polar shift is coming? We have to avoid this calamity, and we have to evolve. Have you seen a coming calamity thing in any of your research in the specifically in the UFO arena?
Well, it's funny because I haven't done. Well, recently I had another guest back on, and I've had Ralph Blumenthal. He's a journalist who did that Tic Tac article,
yeah.
the one that was on like the New York or Washington Post or whatever big publication, that the big article that kind of put it in the mainstream for the first time. He was one of the writers and journalists that were that put out that article and talked about the the whistleblowers and all that stuff. But he went into the rabbit hole because of John Mack, right? And John Mack is the Harvard. Are you guys familiar with John Mack? So this
No.
is John Mack's very fascinating because he was a Harvard psychologist, right, who studied nightmares and night terrors with kids and all this stuff, right? And they went to him because they're like, listen, there's all these people who are saying they have these interactions with aliens and whatever. Like, we think that they're probably dreaming and it's psychological and it's made up or whatever. So John Mack is a Harvard psychologist, one of the most respected psychologists of his time, author, best-selling author on nightmares and all that stuff. He goes to start interviewing these people, and little by little he's like, there's something going on here. So he goes from being a skeptic, going to debunk it, to becoming a believer. And he starts saying, like, I don't know what's going on, but he's like, these are real experiences. And he's like, and there's no denying that. And these people are like, this isn't just mentally made up. And so that, like, I thought was a very fascinating aspect of the story, because I'm like, okay, that's fascinating. And and then you look at like the was it Rwanda, that the school where all the kids
Yeah, it's like 30 something people, including children and teachers too.
yeah, and they all like had this sense of like sadness and like there's a lot of that, right? And like people who have these interactions, and one, I mean, they're communicating non-verbally, which is kind of hits on some of the other stuff we're talking about. So maybe there's a way of doing that we haven't discovered yet. Maybe there's a way of doing it that method is being suppressed from us. I mean, who knows?
That's what I think. I think it's more likely we have the ability, but it's been suppressed for a very long time. Look at this. That's the drawing that the kids drew.
It's a dope drawing.
I mean, I mean, it's pretty wild when you think about like they're adults. You can see interviews with them now, and I mean, look at the Phoenix Lights. Everybody's like, I'm like, literally all of Phoenix saw it, took pictures of this thing that was completely silent, the size of a football field, going over the whole city, and we're just like, yeah, no big deal.
The Battle of LA was insane. That took place in like a matter of like 3 to 4 hours or something like that, in the real early hours of the morning. They were shooting shells at them.
I mean, the Brazilian UFO crash, where they shut down a whole town, and the people who transported whatever thing was in there, end up dying, and it's just like, could be. I mean, you look at crop circles, right? There's a lot of fake ones, but there's a lot of real ones that they mow it, and then they come, the image is still there, and then
we
they
talked to a guy that does them. He says the vast majority are done by people, and you think that like discredits it until he starts explaining why they do it. They're
Crazy
waking
shit,
up
dude.
at like 2 a.m. with this message in their head to go out into a field and make a specific design.
Well,
and then when they show up, other teams are there sometimes. They also were woken up in the middle of the night to go do this.
Here's a crazy man. I told him, I was like, I said, so these markings that you're putting in the grass, I was like, what do they look like? He's like, it often comes to me in it's a muse, like this idea where he's inspired and he'll write it down. Then he'll gather his team and then they'll do it in a spot, either a spot that he's predetermined, or sometimes they've just told him, go to this spot. This is where you should do it. Whatever it is, telling him. And I was like, I did a little trickery on him, a little trickery on him. And I pulled up the Keys of Solomon. some of the sigils
Yeah.
that Solomon was using, and like it's a Kabbalistic teaching, but he's using these sigils to entrap demons to erect his temple. And I said, "Do any of these look familiar to something that you've put down or seen?" And he's like, "Yeah, mate, that one right there is like the third one on the left." And I was like, "That's interesting. That's the sigil of a demon." But I think he even said, I got to re-listen to that episode. He's like, "But there was no circle around it. It was just like the sigil."
Mm.
Now the circle would mean that this demon is entrapped
In the
in.
circle.
Yeah, if when you summon a demon or an entity, you'd write their name and you'd put it in a circle.
That's
If
why
there
they
is no
put themselves, either they put themselves in a ring of salt, or they put the sigil in a ring of salt to
Yes.
entrap either themselves to protect themselves, or to entrap the entity that they're summoning inside the
And
ring.
this guy is just got a download from out of nowhere to put this in a field with no ring. I'm like, okay, I don't know I don't know what you're telling me right now, but this is wild. So
Yeah, yeah. I just thought that was funny though, because like people think that because it, according to this guy, is mostly done by people, that discredits it. But I'm like, no, something else is fascinating. Something is communicating with them telepathically. Ricky, we talked about it multiple times throughout this show. The muses being inspired by your work. Where does that inspiration come from? Are your ideas your own? I don't think these ideas belong to these people. They're just waking up in the middle of the night and deciding, I've got to go put a demon sigil in the middle of this field because it's very important to me right now.
And there's also videos of them being created, and you'll see like these white things, and then they're being created. There was a guy who actually took the image, made it 3D, and thinks it's like some type of a tool or technology that to communicate with other, it's weird. But there's like all these, and then there's like people who go there and they'll test it for. There's tons like where they're
Yeah.
created, and plants sometimes won't grow again in those areas and stuff like that. So I mean, it's just one of the many human mysteries. And so anytime somebody talks to you with like certainty, be skeptical.
Yeah. And one more thing, we're at the hour and 50 mark. We're gonna bring it in for a landing, but I do have a kind of a philosophical question for you guys, and it might be a flop, and that's I've been known to do that.
why
But
are you
why are you? The question that I have is, when it comes to, we've talked a lot of, Jesse Ventura, or let's say Joe Rogan is a great example, or any of these people who sort of they were almost like champions of the public, or let's say even more specifically the conspiracy community. And what ends up happening is, and Alex Jones has suffered the same fate. Eventually you get so big, people notice idiosyncrasies, things that aren't consistent with the message before. You sold out. You got, they gave you shekels, and now, and we do that a lot. And in fact, I'm guilty of that, bitching and moaning about some other content creator, and it's off-putting a little bit. And I ask myself pretty often, especially lately, it's like, think about this from a military standpoint, especially way back in the day before we had firearms, and you would have multiple day wars against other giant bodies of military. And you'd have like one or two guys that were like really, they're out there swinging broadswords, coming back with unbelievable body counts. The opposition is afraid of them. Their name travels far and wide, and our military loves them. We celebrate them. And then one day, after decapitating thousands of Philistines or whatever, they get fucked up. They take an arrow to the knee. They don't swing the same again. They kind of fumble and they stumble and they make a bunch of wrong calls, and it becomes very clear that they no longer have what it takes. But then, like, we kind of just barbecue those people. And I'm starting to wonder if there's something to letting a dude swing broadsword for a long time and then letting him sit the down and not calling him for not doing it anymore. Am I maybe, are we wrong in the times that we're trying to hold these people's feet to the fire? It's almost like some especially some content creators, they become almost more obsessed taking down former heroes, former champions, than they do with even looking into the information anymore.
It's a weird game, right? Because in the UFC, when Michael Chandler comes to mind, a guy, I don't know if you guys watch the UFC,
Yeah.
but he sat out for a couple of years waiting for Conor McGregor, came back, got beat up by Paddy Pimblett, and I'm still not sure how good Paddy Pimblett is. And I'm not
Okay.
sure how good he is and how much Michael Chandler has degraded. But
He looked pretty good. I will say I'm one of those guys that was super skeptical of Patty, and I'm like, he looked really good. Like
he's got a chin on him. My thing with him is like, I was like, he moves back in a straight line with his chin straight up, and Chandler actually hit him. There's like a still frame of this guy's jaw just going to the other side of his head, and it didn't even, you don't notice it in the fight because he didn't even really stun him. So I'm like, okay, he can do that for a little while. But the point is like in MMA, when that person's time has come, like BJ Penn, we knew when BJ Penn was done. We knew when, I don't know, like Donald Cerrone, when these guys are done, they get knocked out. And we're like, then somebody's got to tell them, like, yo, dog, Anthony Smith, like, you gotta stop because you're gonna get hurt. In the community of like content creation, when do you know when you're done? And I'm not saying like Alex Jones is done. No, he still has some in him. He's got a lot in him. It's like, but when do you know you're done? You're not getting
Or
knocked out necessarily, but
maybe is the better question, is there ever a point where your previous body of work is so considerable that, yeah, you're stumbling now, but like, it's okay, dude.
but
We
look
still
at
love you.
look, how do we remember Chuck Liddell? Do you remember Chuck Liddell as a badass?
I remember.
I
I
remember
don't think about him now with the pot belly and all that other stuff. I don't.
I
think
remember
about
him
that.
getting knocked out by Tito Ortiz, like it's with the
Alright.
jab. It's like for me, that's how I remember. I was like, man, maybe you should have stopped a while ago. But I don't know. Like, when do these people stop? When do they hang it up? That's a good question because there's always this one thing. There's that one thing that like the Jesse Ventura thing gets thrown at him. He's like, I can't see past this Trump thing, and he loses the plot. And I think Dave Smith's thing was Kanye West because it touched on like a little bit of the stuff. So that's personal, and he missed it. And I was like, oh, that's a little bit of an arrow on Dave Smith. You missed that one. But I still, I'll leave the door open for you, Dave. But once people get something, with Jordan Peterson, I took your damn shot. Let me free.
Jordan Peterson's a real good question.
Dead, bro. You're done. Get out of here. Next shooter. These ideas are really important. And for me, I'm like, when I look at them and they get these big things wrong, I'm like, maybe we have to cut this guy off. But that's a great question. I don't know when to not listen to these people, when to send them out to pasture because they still have great ideas. They had great ideas. I don't know, dude.
And they paved the way.
And
That's my
paved
thing.
the way.
I
My name
wouldn't
is
be
Top Lobster
sitting here.
because of Jordan Peterson.
I wouldn't be sitting here without Joe Rogan.
What do you think, man?
Well, I think humans get things wrong, and I always try to sympathize with the fact that, like, if I went back and re-listened, tortured myself by re-listening to all my past episodes, I'd probably find tons of stupid shit I said, probably tons of ideas that weren't fully thought out, and if I had millions and millions of listeners who could cut all those in the snippets and expose me for being an idiot for, like. Maybe the conversation would be like, hey, do we trust Ricky? He said this once, and he said, so it's like it's hard because it's like we talked about, we don't know when it's organic, when it's just a organic you're evolving your ideas, and as you consume information or maybe even things that are happening outside of podcasting, like in your personal life, discussions with close friends or other researchers or whatever, like maybe you evolve, or are you being influenced? We just had a Union of Unwanted Monday, and Steve from AM Wake Up, like we've had this debate about 1 billion times where he just goes, well, we were right way before all of them and them and this guy and that guy and and I'm just like, okay, I get it. Like, I get it. I like, we'll pat ourselves on the back. We were right. But it's like, it doesn't mean that like a Russell Brand or and to me, all the rape allegations only makes him more credible because it sounds like they're trying to basically paint him in a bad light. So like, it doesn't mean that they couldn't have evolved. And if they're on our team for, in certain topics, and if you think like, hey, what the shit they got wrong, they like got wrong just because they just got it wrong. It wasn't because they were trying to be deceiving or lead you in the wrong direction, but maybe they just, who knows what upbringing they had, what maybe didn't have enough people around them that they trusted or respected to like push back against some of their views. Maybe they had too many yes men around them. Maybe, you know, whatever it may be. So it's like I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt. I mean, a lot of, you know, we had examples like we talked about today, Dennis McKenna, uh, Tyrell Ventura, Jesse Ventura, you know, so many people who have done some amazing work, and then in other, you know, circumstances they're completely wrong, and they're complete, you know, and it's like as humans, like from our perspective, like I'm always gonna like, hey, if most of the things they do are good, I'm going to still probably consume that stuff. And then when something comes up that's bullshit, like if I just think it's a honest opinion, then I'll just be like, okay, that's just bullshit. I mean, once it gets to a point where I'm like, okay, now they're trying to, like, I feel like I'm trying to be tricked, or I feel like it's not sincere, or I feel like they're pushing, you know, you get that car salesman feel where like you're just trying to sell me anything, you know, then you know, for your own incentives and for your, it's not that you really think this car is nice, it's not because you really would drive this thing, it's just you want me to buy it, you're, and for your own financial incentive. Like when I get that feeling, then I get worried. I mean, I think Jordan Peterson, he's had a lot of issues, you know, depression, anxiety. I think he has some there's a huge percentage of people who get in psychiatry and become psychologists because they're trying to deal with their own issues. I forget what the percentage is, but there's a huge percentage of psychologists that get into the field for the wrong reasons. They get into it not because they're trying to help others, but they're trying to find solutions to their own, you know, emptiness and self-doubt and whatnot. And so I think that could be a part of, you know, what happens with Jordan Peterson. Can he say some things that are profound at times? Yeah, but I mean, even when Jordan Peterson would talk at times, like I'd be like, I don't know about this guy, you know, like there's certain things that like he sounds smart, but like I'm dumb, so like, you know, I've been around people who are smarter than me all the time, so like that doesn't impress me. Like everybody sounds smarter than me, so it's like, you know, you sounding smart's not gonna, like I still look for the substance in it, right? Like you can say like, what are you actually saying? Let's like, okay, you're saying this, but it's not that profound. You just said it in a way that sounds poetic and sounds intelligent. So you make it sound more profound than it really is. But do you really have some new interesting idea or theory or philosophy that you're sharing? No, you're not. You know, so I mean, it's the same thing with like, and Rogan's been he's been tricked before. I mean, Stefan Molyneux or whatever, however you say his name. Yes, he you know, I remember Rogan having him on, and like Rogan like thought he was such this, you know, super intelligent and like what, you know, and then later ended up being like, yeah, he's kind of weird, or he was kind of like, you know, wasn't a huge fan of some of his ideas. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, you know, some people can get tricked by what they're saying, and or by not what they're saying, but how they're saying it. And to me, like that's never worked on me. Like when I listen to somebody talk, it's like, okay, I'm not going to think you're right just because you found some really creative or artistic or
you have a British accent.
Yeah, you know, yeah,
That
or
works.
you see it. It's funny because even in soccer in America, you see a lot of that where people will, a lot of soccer clubs will hire people with British accents or Latin accents, you know, Latin American, Argentinians, whatever, and they'll hire them as soccer coaches because parents will pay more because they think that they're better coaches because they have an accent. It's like, no, he's just saying the same thing that American coach said, only he has an accent, so you think it must be deeper and understanding the game.
But that's the problem, right, Ricky? It's like it's not these individuals, it's our perception of them. We keep elevating people to be something beyond what we are.
Me and David, they were like, our wives are like, oh, we want to see, like, experience other cultures. And I'm like, other cultures.
No, I don't give a fuck about other cultures. I don't give a fuck about their accents, their food, or the way they dress. I don't give a shit. But
yeah, America's pretty cool. Like, let's
if we stop elevating these people to these positions and we realize that they're no different than us. It's the same thing as trust the experts, right? There's no experts. There's people who, you know, they're experts in their relative field, but even experts can be wrong. Stop elevating them to some position that exceeds just a normal human. And there is one difference between like me and let's say like even Alex Jones or Joe Rogan. I haven't been unfortunate enough yet to have been wrong on record for as much as they've been wrong on record.
And
meaning I'm wrong a lot, but I just don't have it recorded.
It's just like I don't want to keep you forever, Ricky. This is it's a fun conversation. But so the thing with like, all right, like back to like Steve, I had failed Steve's purity test like back in my libertarian days. So he hated me, I guess, for a while. he also he hated me enough to remember me. I didn't even remember him to then like trash us on Tinfoil Hat when he went on sometime.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's like called us feds, and I was like, maybe
No,
I'm not
he
paid.
he said that we were controlled opportunists, not
Right.
controlled opposition. Uh, we saw an opportunity, somebody
Well,
opened a door for us, and that's how we got
so
here.
here's the thing: there are like small tests that you can fail, and apparently under his, I guess, under his microscope, I failed the anarchism libertarian test, the purity test, but I did it on purpose because I studied it thoroughly and I realized it was and doesn't apply. It does not work after. I was like, this needs to be discarded or at least re-examined, and we need to move in a different direction. So I did that, but there's big things. The and the were those big things. If you failed that, I'm like, that is my delineating line where I'm like, you are safely discarded to the side here. You have failed the test. This was an easy test too, especially after like the first 2 months. Everybody kind of knew what was going on. You can see it. If you failed that, not only did you hurt people, but it's kind of like either you're doing it on purpose or you just didn't know. And if you didn't know, well, guess what, man? You can't have that kind of a platform. So I
Mm.
feel like for me, it's like the bigger things. I can't like if we nitpick on these small things and just like start canceling people for little stuff.
Fighting in the nuance, yeah.
Yeah, it's like what are we doing? What are we doing? But there are these huge moments that you'll see them when they come and you're like, wow. I think Israel is becoming this other huge moment. Not yet, but it will be this one big dividing moment. That's how everything is pushing. And it'll be a point where you're like, all right, well, you'll either see the crimes that this government is committing or you don't,
Mhm.
and people will pick a side. And from that, you'll be able to just, okay, we can safely discard. Again, Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro. It's kind of funny how they like align on the wrong side of all of these topics as well.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's like those are the big moments where I don't like cancel culture, but it's like gotta cancel them. Like,
Almost like I don't
or
even
at
know if it means cancel them as much as like, can we all just agree to stop at that?
listening. Yeah, just don't look
Yeah.
at this. Like they were wrong. They led you astray, and almost meaningfully, like on purposefully. So it's like let's let these guys just go do what they're gonna do. But like, hey, everybody, you saw that, right? Okay,
Yeah.
good. Let's move forward because we
Yeah,
have other shit going on.
and the thing is, and I agree with that. I mean, but the problem is like when it goes too far, where like and again, and I love Steve, but he gets on these rants and it's saying Whitney Webb. Whitney Webb has been she's been on my show forever. I mean, before she was a household name, she was on when she was working at Mint Press, and it's like I think they're so skeptical of everything that even when you get somebody who's kind of on your team, right? Like they have a hard time accepting they're on their team, right?
Mm.
And I think in some cases, like you're right, like Jordan Peterson, like he got it wrong, and maybe it's a reflection of his character. And you're like, now I don't know if I can trust you because like I don't know if you're going to be tricked again. You're going to be spewing something that you're uncertain of or whatever. But I also think like, hey, we can't demonize everybody because like Steve, same thing. Like he has this like a checklist of like, okay, if you get this wrong or if you don't agree with him on this one
That's a
thing,
lot of it.
yeah,
That's the thing.
drive me
Yeah.
crazy. But there's infighting and everything, like the 9/11 community. Oh,
Oh,
if we
yeah.
disagree on if a plane, I've had Ryan Dawson on my show. I've had plenty of people on my show that like, will just on other researchers. I mean, you know how many people on my show, and I think, he's one of the gold standards of research. He's not perfect by any stretch, and he'll never say that he is. But James Corbett, and I've had plenty of people that will call out James Corbett's work, and I'm like, really, like this is what you're going to waste your energy on is somebody who's given us so much good work, but because you don't agree with him on this one, maybe a JFK assassination specific topic or something about 9/11 or whatever, or, he's not focusing enough on this or Alex Jones got some of that. I mean, he was like, well, he's not focusing enough on Israel,
Yeah.
and then he would have somebody, I forget who it was. Is it Stu Peters or whoever it was that was, had a debate with him on the topic, and I'm like, well, look, he's obviously willing to have somebody on to discuss it and
Right.
kind of push back against it, which is the complete opposite of what Robert Kennedy Jr. is doing. I mean, Robert Kennedy Jr., he must have like tons of blackmail on him because the
Dude.
the
Mhm.
the fact that he is so like he won't even show you any signs of him agreeing with anybody else like that,
Right.
you know, on this issue. Like he won't even like be like, yeah, maybe you're right. Like he doesn't even like, but yet on all the other issues, he's open-minded and he's willing to discuss different perspectives, and he doesn't get defensive and he doesn't get, you know, emotional, and he doesn't seem to get worked up or whatever. He seems to be logical, and just so it's like it's something really fishy about that. But yeah, I mean, I think the alternative media community, like we do spend too much time sometimes attacking ourselves, and it's like, okay, well, they're not the bad guys. Like you can either spend time like because if you think they're a bad person, that's different, right? Like if you think like they're purposely trying to, you know, I had
I'm a
people
bad
who,
person for sure, but I'm not lying. I'm not lying to you guys.
Well,
yeah,
but
well,
what I don't understand is how come there's not room for this? Like, all right, like you mentioned Alex Jones. I think Alex Jones is highly likely to have been co-opted by somebody. You know, they beat him down to death with this thing. You think he doesn't have a handler? I
Trillions of
wouldn't be surprised
dollars.
if he did. If it came out right now that he had a handler, he was co-opted for years and he's been pushing a narrative, I'd go, makes sense. Not surprised. But I love Alex Jones. I would love to hang out with Alex Jones. I would love to have a beer with Alex Jones. I'd love to be at a barbecue with Alex Jones. Like what I don't understand is why does it okay, Thomas the Paranoid American, awesome guy, host of Reality Czars, and you know, he does a bunch of comic stuff. He is a Freemason, among many things. And I don't agree with every take that he has. And I think like, hey, probably not good to be a Freemason, but I love Thomas. He's a great dude. He's a
Great
lot of
dude.
fun. I'll always do why the is that not prevalent in this community? It's like, why does somebody have to get a take wrong and then become the enemy? That's insane. That's insane because if you hold me to that standard, I'm going to have nothing but enemies. I'm wrong all the time. So I just don't understand.
it becomes counterproductive because
It
the way I
does.
look at it is like, okay, if we have different theories on something, but we're both on the path of trying to expose the same thing, we're trying to find truth, we're trying to expose the elite, we're trying to expose the controllers of the world, we're trying to expose the real corruption and conspiracies of the world. Maybe we come up with different theories, maybe we have different opinions on how to go about that, but if we're like, the way I look at it, like we're still on the same team, right? So it's like, to me, and you know, Alex Jones is a perfect example. You're right. I mean, if something came out that said, hey, like he was being influenced this whole time, you'd be like, okay, that's not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, when you're in our world, like, is there anything out of the realm of possibility? We've
Exactly.
uncovered so many different things. But I also think like, hey, he also exposed I mean, 9/11 and the Road to Tyranny. You hear so many people reference that documentary. He was at Waco. You can find videos of him at Waco protesting. You
Yeah.
know, like this dude is like, he's been on the front line since the beginning. And you know, and does he get wrong? Yeah. Is he a flawed human being? Obviously. I mean, he was an alcoholic for a while. He was like, you know, he loses his mind on the air all the time. You know, it's like but if we were, you know, balls deep into these subjects for this many years, and a lot of times doing a radio show on our own, where we're just kind of in an echo chamber talking to ourselves, like, yeah, we probably have a couple minutes of, you know, insanity from time to time. And so it's like, I give him the you know, a little room for it. But when people are like, he's a piece of crap, he's doing this, I'm like, okay, yeah, he's gotten some things wrong, but I'm like, he's also gotten some things right. And
Yeah.
there's some, you're hoping that there's people who get exposed to, maybe there's going to be some people who get exposed to the wrong things, but they also get exposed to the right things, and then that will lead them down their own path of researching and, you
Those
know, and
people,
getting.
by the way, Ricky, you know what their problem is? It's not Alex Jones. It's that they're following a man. You're putting all your stock and all your faith and all your energy into one talking head. And so when that person deviates from what you believe,
When they
it's like,
fall,
you know, it's it's earth shattering. It falls
I'm
like,
waiting. I'm waiting for me, like, for the thing that I'm gonna be devastatingly wrong about.
yeah,
Because it's gonna be that one thing, and I'm always looking. I'm like, what am I gonna be wrong about, man? It's like something's gonna sneak up on me, and it'll cater to my bias, whatever that is. I try to check it all the time, but it's happening. It's on its way.
It's okay, but we're all but the thing is, I guess one of my points is like, but that's okay. Like we shouldn't fear that, because it's like, as long as I'm honestly, because I'm gonna get wrong, you guys are gonna get, like, we all get wrong, like, but it's like, what's our purpose? Like, what was our incentive? Like, what was our motivation? Like, are we trying to find truth? Are we trying to find information that's interesting? Are we trying to connect the dots? Are we trying to gather all these puzzle pieces to have a better understanding of ourselves and the world around us? Like, if that's our honest interest and what we're honestly trying to do, then in the process of doing that, if we get something wrong, like, guess what? Like, we're not going to be that hard on ourselves, and our listeners and our friends and our family's not going to be that hard, because they know that we weren't trying to lie. We just got something wrong, you know?
Were you trying to pursue the truth, or were you trying to make a coin and rug pull people? Right? Like, is that what you were doing?
This
But
is
listen,
the question.
Ricky, it's clear that you've been co-opted by the. It's clear that your pockets are full of shekels. It's clear that you're running defense for Joe Rogan and Alex Jones and all these people. I'm
Can
sure
you tell
that
Steve? Can you tell Steve that I like him? Even I think he would love to see me dead, but I like Steve. I think I'd like to have him on the show.
yeah, and tell him too that we're if his definition of controlled opportunists is that somebody paid us, he's devastatingly wrong, and I wish he were right. There's nobody.
I am already like so the Monday show, I haven't uploaded the audio. It'll be up today. I've been kind of busy couple days since the show, but I'm already like, I can foresee the negative comments, because he just goes on like these rants of like just being mad at everybody who's like kind of on our team, and just like mad at this guy because he got that wrong, and mad at that, you know. And I'm just like, yeah, and I'm just like, okay, Steve, I get it, but like, can we just talk about, you know, he's still. And again, I don't know where you guys stand on this issue, but he, right after the attempted Trump assassination, he was quickly saying it was theater. It was, you know, it was completely theater. It was fake.
He would like us, dude. Are you kidding me?
We went on tinfoil hat saying that. Like, we were the first people saying that.
Like 2 days after the event happened.
Yeah, and Sam was like, I don't know if you guys should say this. He didn't even want to put it on tinfoil hat. He put it on dangerous, whatever the, because he has 1,000 shows. And he was like, I'll put it on tinfoil hat, fine. But he was like, people are going to be upset. I was like, yeah, I don't know if they shot at this guy. It just didn't look like it. So yeah,
I know a guy died in the audience. I know that there's a ritual about getting blood on your ear and blood on your right hand and blood on your right foot. And for some reason, his shoe was off, and the whole thing was very strange. But what you've just said here to me is that
Steve would love us. Yeah.
I mean, you guys are, but that's the thing. It's like, and so if you agree on one issue, but then if you find the other issue that you disagree on, then all of a sudden it's like, it just, to me, it becomes counterproductive. And I don't, like, I'm always uncomfortable when people are on the show bashing other researchers. I've had people, and I know these people. I mean, James Corbett he came on my show when he had zero reason to come on my show. I had nobody listening, and he was one of my first guests. Jason Burns, same thing. And it's like, people will try to convince me that these are like bad people who are trying to manipulate their followers and listeners, and I'm like, no, I know these people personally. I've had tons of conversations. I'm like, they're not, if they got something wrong, they sincerely just got it wrong. They're not.
Dude, that's what keeps happening. It's like, the more we do this, the more people I meet that I'm like, I only knew them because I would absorb their content, and then when I meet them, I'm like, you're just a regular dude. Yeah, you're just a regular dude. Your brain works barely better than mine.
Very suspicious of Luke Rudkowski. Met him at Simcast, still suspicious. Then we went on his show like 2 times, 3 times, I don't even remember. I was like, I don't like this guy. He's got this weird thing about him. It's just a bit. That's the thing. You meet these people.
All weird, right? That's why we're here. We're all broken weirdos, man.
Well, isn't that? I mean, that's such a really good point. Like, if you're in our world of alternative media, like,
you're fucking retarded.
Weird. Like, there's something, like, you're like, oh, there's something weird about them. I'm like, yeah, that's why he didn't get tricked, because he was weird.
Do you want to know how weird it is? My mother-in-law, we got to end the episode. I'm so sorry. We're keeping you for. My mother-in-law walks into my office here, and she looks and she goes, oh, what's that? Because it's like a camera pointed at the corner of a wall with lights and a big light here, and there's computers. And I'm just like, don't even worry about it. Just don't even worry about it. You're vaccinated. You wouldn't get it. Let's just keep this moving, man.
Yeah.
We're weird. We're weird people. Oh, Dave, before we end, one more thing that Steve will be pissed off about us.
Oh, yes.
That we are doing a festival that's going to be better than his Bohemian Grove. We have just secured Sam Tripoli. We have secured Shane Cashman to narrate the entire thing. He's going to narrate it your entire life. No, just
MC, I think, is the word you're looking for.
MC is the word. And last night, out of nowhere, we pulled off Owen Benjamin, which could be a conflict of interest. I know that Owen Benjamin and Sam are not seeing eye to eye, but we're bringing them
their best
together.
Friends. I think they're best friends, and you know the way best friends sometimes get a little,
Yes.
extra stupid with each other. They're best friends. They're practically brothers, and we want them to show that brotherly love at our event. And
This
I
is all
think-
going to be happening, and more details will come, but it's going to be so. It's like I'm so excited. I hope Sam doesn't get mad about it, but like Owen volunteered yesterday. He was like, "Yeah, I want to do this," and I'm like, when Owen says he wants to do this, I'm like, "All right,
What are we
you're
supposed
in."
to say? No.
Yeah, like no,
Yeah,
you can't.
no,
They're gonna
no.
make up. I'm gonna print out one big T-shirt for them. They're gonna wear it. It's gonna be beautiful. We're gonna
One
get
big
along.
T-shirt. They're gonna wear it together.
And we're gonna bring this comedy, the comedy conspiracy community together. And then Steve Pecoinen. Well, how you say
you
I don't know. Is that how you say it?
No
I,
idea.
I think so. I've struggled to say his name too, but
You're next, brother. Coming for
right.
you. We're gonna be friends. We're gonna wear a T-shirt or something.
You're gonna
Whole
like
gang.
us, Steve. All right, you're gonna like us. And if you want to call us controlled opportunists, what do I care? Yeah, sure.
yeah. Well, I think a lot of people that have been censored have been like a little butthurt. Like I
get it.
I
You know who I see doing that? I know we're supposed to end this show. David Ike. David Ike is doing a whole lot of complaining.
Ryan
And it's like,
Dawson wants to fight me, and it's like Ryan. I've spoken to you a number of times. But it's just like they get canceled, and then everyone's against them, and I'm like, I get it. I haven't been canceled, and maybe you're mad about that, but I'm like, dog, thank you for being canceled and then coming back because you took those arrows. Owen Benjamin, same thing, canceled, came back. You took those arrows, so now we could not get canceled and then build off of what you're doing.
Mhm.
But there's a psychological toll, I think, Ricky.
It's
I
hard
think
to get canceled for conspiracy and then
sucks.
watch conspiracy blow up.
Yeah.
No, I got kicked off YouTube right after having Dr. Pierre McCullough and Dr. Robert Malone, and those shows were like just blown up on YouTube. Got kicked off YouTube, and then Rogan has them on, and everybody's talking about those episodes. I'm like, you motherfucker! I'm like, I had them on first, and everybody could have been taught, and but I'm like, instead of being mad, you know what I did? I'm like, I'm so happy that Rogan has finally had him on, and he's going to help change this narrative and expose way more people than I could ever imagine exposing to that information. Because if that's your goal, if that's what really motivates you, that's the most important part. Like, who cares if I don't get the clicks? Like, that's why I always love James Corbett. James Corbett's like, hey, you want to post on your website? Go ahead. You want to post on your YouTube channel? Go ahead. I don't care. It's all open source. I just want to get the information out there. Yeah. And I'm like, I love that. I'm like, that it shows you what's really motivating them. And unfortunately, people just don't care about that. They're just like, well, I'm getting shadow banned and this person's getting all these clicks. It must be because of this or that. And I'm like, I've heard people, Steve being one of them, be like, oh, this person doesn't call me back anymore. And I'm like, did you talk about him? Like, what do you like?
Controlled opportunist?
Exactly. I'm like, so it's just like, I don't burn any bridges. I try to be nice to everybody. If you seem like a sincere person, we can disagree. I've had Professor Richard Wolff on my show, who's the leading scholar in Marxism and Karl Marx and his whole history and biography. So it's like, yeah, I'll explore anything, and I'm willing to go down any rabbit hole. And if you seem like we might disagree on things, but if like we disagree just because we have different worldviews and not because you're trying to trick people, then I'm okay with that. Disagreeing is fun. You should have your ideas challenged.
That's it. Or you could just hang around with people who think all the same that you do, and that's called an echo chamber.
That's called the Libertarian Party.
Right.
Ricky, thank you for wasting your time with us, man. We're gonna get this was fun. We should should
genuine
do
pleasure,
again.
dude.
Yeah, but we have to end it. That's all good things. Tell them one more time where they can find you. I want them to go to your website and all that. Whoever doesn't know you for whatever reason.
Weirdly enough, I've told the story on a couple podcasts ago on my podcast, but I got reinstated on YouTube out of nowhere.
Yeah,
nice.
Which is weird because all my archives are there, and the Dr. Pierre McCullough show and the Dr. Robert Malone show is there, which is weird. And I did just get a strike for episode talking about as a remedy, and that's which is weird of all things. So it makes you wonder, like, what are they censoring? Why
we got popped for what kind of water was it? Mineral? No, not mineral water.
No. Oxygenated, I don't remember. Some kind of water. We had an episode called The Final Solution with this guy Dustin Nemos, where he's basically like, yo, our Nephilim are dead demons and they're just dead Nephilim. And I'm like,
no, he said demons are dead. That's what he said.
Oh, right. That's what he said.
Which was the best and funniest line I've ever heard.
It lived on YouTube, but we talked about
water. That's
water. Yeah,
Alkaline
step too
water.
far. Step too far with water. Anyway, this is the Ripple Effect podcast.
Anyway, this is your
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah, that's the so I have a clips channel which I basically, started to try to have some type of footprint on YouTube. And so I just put like stuff that was kind of safe for YouTube, little clips. But yeah, my old channel, they gave me it back and we're slowly uploading all my archives. And yeah, they definitely didn't give me all my subscribers back. But I was actually kind of surprised that so many were still subscribed to the channel that didn't exist. That was kind of weird. So and I was also kind of surprised that they literally have been holding on to everything since 2021. So they don't just, delete everything. They're literally holding on to all my past archives, everything from, episode 1 to episode whatever it was, like 4 something, when it got deleted. So it was, kind of weird that they're holding on to everything. But
That is strange.
but
you
yeah,
had Clint on.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
that guy's
Clint's
an
been
ass. We hate that guy.
Yeah.
I'm joking. We don't.
Yeah,
we don't.
underneath that you see Adam Green. He's also another one who can be a little controversial.
Oh yeah,
and,
we don't talk to Adam. He's not nice to us.
He used to like me, and then he stopped following me. I don't know why.
But yeah, he's another one who kind of like sometimes does get in that like seems to like critique other people's work. Who
We're
doesn't-
all paranoid conspiracy, we're paranoid schizophrenics. so everybody, we're paranoid about everybody. It makes sense.
Yeah. And so you'll find all those links at the rippleeffectpodcast.com or rickyverandas.com. They'll all take you to the same place. You can also find the Union of the Unwanted on YouTube for the time being. So right now, both shows are on YouTube for the time being. Best place is probably on our websites or on Rumble, because I think Rumble's, for the most part, aren't really censoring the type of stuff we're talking about. So do that. And then the audio obviously is available anywhere you can get audio podcasts. So, but I can't thank you guys enough for having me. This was a really fun discussion. Hopefully we do it again in the near future.
Holy shit, he wants to do it again. I was 100% like, this dude's never going to come back.
What
from
an
this silver.
idiot.
Thank you for your time, brother. It was a great
Yeah,
conversation.
thank you.
We
And,
typically don't go over 2 hours, so that tells
Yeah.
you something.
All right, guys. Until next time, don't forget to obey, submit, and comply. We'll see you later.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real.
You can persuade them that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see. You can't. Because they'll laugh in the face of an explanation that